of the debate today. But if I could just take issue with one point in particular he raised when he criticised the Prime Minister for not on one.
Hello there, it's the 1st of April and it's a Monday. And we're in the debate in the House of Commons. It's the second part of the indicative votes that we dealt with last Wednesday. We had a very long programme then, and the Speaker chose 4 different motions to go to be debated. And so that's in the middle of that debate now. I'll just run quickly. There's a customs union, Ken Clarke, and confirmatory vote, and the revoking of the Article 50, and a common market 2. What we're going to do this evening, we're going to listen to the debate, and then when it comes to the voting, which may be an hour or so, maybe 2 hours away yet, we'll discuss things whilst the MPs are going through the lobbies and ticking their bits of paper. So back to the House of Commons now, and it was Stephen Barclay speaking when we cut in on him.
In the wider debate, but it's worth reminding the. Well, I've just got 5 minutes, but I'll take one further, and then I think, Mr. Speaker, your steer is I should press on.
I'm sorry to intervene on him. I was going to raise this point in my speech and hope he'd respond, but as he's speaking before me. Can he illuminate the House on this letter that has gone to the Prime Minister from 170 of our colleagues? Did he sign it? What's in it? And is it true, as the papers are being briefed, that it keeps no deal on the table despite a resolution of this House?
Well, I think all of us as politicians are often accused of not answering questions, so let's be very specific. I haven't signed any letter of the sort to which he refers. I have the opportunity to meet with the Prime Minister most days, and if I have a point to raise with my right honourable friend, obviously, I would do so there. But no, I'm conscious I've got 5 minutes and I also wish to press on. So I think it's worth reminding the House it's only last Friday that members of the... Well, I don't know why the Honourable Lady is chuntering from a position. I have been given a steer from the Chair to give time for other members, and she wants to come in a second time. I have taken her intervention. On Friday, the House voted against the withdrawal agreement, and it's worth pointing out that a number of the motions before the House require the withdrawment as part of the package. Likewise, and that relates to motions C and D, likewise, motions before the House relating to a public vote, again, is a public vote on proposals that include the withdrawal agreement, the same withdrawal agreement those members who have signed them have opposed. And the 4th motion before the House includes a vast number of signatories from those who stood on manifestos contrary to what they have signed. So I think, again, it points to the contradictions inherent in the approach that many have taken throughout this debate, because people are taking positions one week and then signing motions which are contrary to that the following week. Well, I've used 4 minutes of my 5, so to very quickly run through. I mean, many of these points, Mr. Speaker, were raised in the debate last Wednesday, including in terms of the Permanent Customs Union, where the concern is giving control over our trade policy, in particular around our trade defences to EU countries over which we would have no say. And I think it is questionable why we would want to give MEPs in other countries control over our trade defences, whether that's in areas like ceramics or steel or many of the issues that are debated in this House. And my right honourable friend, the member for Fulham and Chelsea, has quite often drawn the attention of the House to, I'm pleased to see him in his place, to some of the issues I don't have time to expand on today, but he has done. Likewise, the member for East Antrim reminded the House when he intervened on the father of the House in terms of the fact that it is regulatory issues, regulatory alignment that often drives friction at the border, much more so than the debate which tends to centre on tariffs. In terms of motion D, again, this motion was debated last Wednesday, Mr. Speaker, so we don't need to rehearse the arguments around the financial contributions, the accepting of freedom of movement, the alignment with EU rules, all the things which cause concern. And indeed, the Bank of England, no ardent Brexiteer he, has talked about the damage, how highly undesirable this option is, because of the rule-taking element strangulating a part of our economy that pays £72 billion of tax in 2016-17, and we should be cautious in terms of the rule-taking implications for that. And indeed, in his remarks, the member for Grantham talked about an extension to the 22nd of May. I simply remind my very good friend a point I'm sure he is aware, which is that the conclusions from the Council didn't give an automatic right to an extension to the 22nd of May, given that we passed the deadline of the 29th of March. Again, on the motion E, we debated this last week. Indeed, it was defeated by 27 votes, so the arguments on that were rehearsed. Likewise, in terms of motion D, we debated that. Again, that was to be defeated by 109 votes. So what we have really is a rehashing of a number of arguments that didn't curry favour last week, and again many of the issues remain. A public inquiry under motion G, it's not specified for how long, usually they're for on average 3 years. Are we going to subject our businesses to a further 3 years of uncertainty, followed by potentially a further vote? So what we need to do, Mr Speaker, is to give a certainty to our business community to safeguard the rights of EU citizens. That is what the House has rejected in terms of rejecting the deal. It's rejected in terms of the withdrawal agreement, and what we see today is a number of motions signed by people who just last Friday rejected the withdrawal agreement, stood on manifestos which contradict the motion before the House, and in essence are saying today to colleagues across the House, vote for a package which includes a part that they themselves rejected just a matter of days ago.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm glad we're resuming this indicative vote exercise, and it's been a good debate today. I think it's been a good tone and good contributions from around the House. I do recognise that no majority was found last week for any option, but I equally recognise that Parliament is trying at some speed to complete a process that the Prime Minister should have carried out 2 years ago. Can I just begin by saying a few words to all members across the House, but particularly perhaps to colleagues sitting on the benches behind me. I recognise that many members have a single preferred option and understandably want to push that option as hard and as fast and as far as possible. No one wants to stand in the way of that, but I do urge colleagues to enter the spirit of the exercise we're now engaged in, and that means supporting options other than their own preferred option in order to break the deadlock. It is important that we find a majority, if we can, this evening, if that is possible. I do recognise how difficult that could be for individual members and how they've grappled with the position they've tried to take, but I do ask them to enter it in that spirit and thank them for the approach they've taken so far. So far as the Labour position today is concerned, it will again be to support amendments that are consistent with the two credible options that we've been advancing time and again. In the first place, a close economic relationship with the EU based on a customs union and close single market alignment, and secondly, on a public vote to prevent no deal on a damaging Brexit. I'm going to come on to the customs union in a minute, and I will take an intervention. On that basis, we will whip support for Amendment C, which is the customs union as a minimum, in the name of the Father of the House. Amendment D, Common Market 2.0, in the name of the Honourable Member for Grantham and Stamford. And Amendment E on a confirmation public vote in the name of the Honourable Member for Hove, assisted by the Honourable Member for Sedgefield. I will come to Amendment G in one moment. So far as Amendment C is concerned, Labour has long supported a customs union. It is a vital component of any deal that will genuinely protect manufacturing, and it is necessary to protect against a hard border in Northern Ireland. But I say again, as I said last week, it must be a minimum, and that is written into this amendment in terms, and that is the position of the Labour Party. I will give way.
Thank you for giving way. Perhaps he could, on the subject of the customs union, just to take him back a few years, and the Labour Party was wholly opposed to TTIP. I think it was before he was in the House, but nevertheless, at a time when the UK had a seat at the table, now as he's proposing it, the UK would not have a seat at the table. The EU would set our trade policy. Why is he in favour of this arrangement, particularly at a time when the United States says they want to launch trade talks with the European Union? The EU, of course, in general, has got a system of social insurance, not our system for the NHS. How does he think this is a better arrangement to defend his NHS?
Well, I'm grateful for that intervention. It's a serious point, and before the Labour Party surfaced its proposition for a customs union, we had long and hard discussions with the EU about the sort of customs union that we were discussing. Not the customs union, but a customs union, and we looked at the influence that now is there for EU members and how you would devise a pillar that gave influence to a very close third party. I've stood here many times said that won't be easy, but that's why we've always said a customs union with a say, and it's not something we haven't sought to discuss with the EU, and it's very telling that when we put our proposal to the Prime Minister, the EU were very warm about the possibility of negotiating that. I take the point, but we've addressed that, I hope, in the way that we've approached a customs union. Mr Speaker, Amendment D, Labour's preference remains the approach we set out in the letter to the Prime Minister in January of this year. That is a customs union and single market alignment. But we recognise that Amendment D has a number of similarities and could deliver a close economic relationship with the EU. The amendment has been revised since the first phase of indicative votes and now includes further detail about the form of a customs arrangements envisaged, which has similarities with the approach that the Labour Party has set out. It doesn't specify that it should be permanent, which is our preferred option, but it does say that it should be at least until alternative arrangements can be found. Now, there do remain differences between our policy position and Amendment D, but the amendment would allow for close economic partnership with the EU. It is a credible proposition, and it's on that basis that we will support it this evening. I won't, because I'm trying to make some progress. Mr Speaker, as far as Amendment E is concerned, we will support this amendment tonight because at this late stage it's now clear that any Brexit deal agreed in this Parliament will need further democratic approval. That is what this amendment will do. It would put a lock around any deal this Prime Minister forces through at the 11th hour, or any revised deal that comes about at this very late stage. It would ensure that any Tory Brexit deal is subject to a referendum lock. In other words, it upholds the principle that any such deal must be confirmed by the public if we're to proceed. I do want to briefly finish by dealing with Amendment G, because I do understand the reason this is put forward, and I've had the opportunity to discuss it with the honourable and learned member for Edinburgh and the South West. Our focus today is on the way forward, which is why we're supporting the three amendments in place. G, in a sense, is a fallback if that exercise fails, and I do therefore understand why it's put forward. We won't be voting in favour of it tonight, but we do accept that this is an issue that is going to have to be confronted by this House in due course, and I will give way on that point.
I'm really extremely puzzled as to the position taken by the Labour front bench here. We all have to compromise today. I'm going to vote for motion D, and I'm on the record as having concerns about it and saying it didn't go far enough. What does he think the reaction will be of working-class voters if, by Labour front bench's failure to support this motion tonight, we crash out with no deal a week on Friday?
I'm grateful for the intervention. I think as we try to find a way forward, it's important that we all adopt the right tone all the way through, and sort of throwing around what will people think of this, that and the other. We, of course, have always said we will take whatever measures are necessary to stop no deal. The exercise we're involved in at the moment is trying to break the impasse and find a way through on the indicative process. I accept if that fails, there will have to be an insurance exercise, but we're not at that stage yet. I'm not rejecting the principle. I'm not going to take another intervention, but I'm not going to stand at this dispatch box and have across the House the throwing around of allegations that you're not interested in that, you're not interested in the other. We are trying to have a different debate with a different tone, which is in a grown-up way to find a way forward. And I'm prepared to engage in that. I'm prepared to accept that the principle is one we're going to have to confront. But at the moment, our focus is on how do we break the deadlock. And if we can do that, we then move on to how we progress. If we can't, then of course we have to look at other options. That's a genuine, sincere position from someone who cares a great deal about whether we crash out without a deal. Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Ed Vesey.
I'm very grateful, Mr Speaker, and I just, I want to start with the usual mantra that, of course, I have voted for Brexit 3 times, and I have backed the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement, but I will be supporting the Customs Union and Common Market 2.0 tonight. And I want to make it absolutely clear to anyone thinking of not supporting it that this does not preclude you supporting the withdrawal agreement should it come back as MV4. But it is quite clear that we need a plan B. The House needs to show what it is in favour of if we can't get the withdrawal agreement through. And the reason is because certain elements, sadly in my party, are hell-bent on shoving through a no deal. I read on the cover of the Times, and I apologise to the Secretary of State for putting him in the same category, this morning that 170 Conservative MPs have signed a letter to the Prime Minister, which they've kept secret from all their other colleagues, by the way, so keen are they on debate, calling for a no deal, despite Parliament's resolution. So Parliament has to vote tonight to support these measures, to show that it remains in favour of a reasoned exit from the EU and not to be taken in by some of the absurd arguments that we are hearing. I have to say I am confused as to how we have got to this place 3 years after the referendum where no deal turns out to be allegedly what people voted for. And I look aghast at some colleagues who I have long admired, who spent the last 3 years attacking the judges for daring to suggest that Parliament might have a vote on Article 50, praying in aid the manifesto which we lost on, despite having supported a coalition government for 5 years which campaigned on a manifesto that hadn't existed in 2010, berating Remainers for treating with foreign powers and then merrily going off to the Polish and Hungarian governments asking them to force a no deal on the United Kingdom. Because the fact is that too many of our colleagues have decided that they are the self-appointed interpreters of Brexit, and that anything that gets in their way has to be stopped. But when those of us in this House, and I count almost everyone in the chamber this evening, want to make reasonable progress and deliver Brexit in a reasonable way, the constitutional experts from the hard Brexit wing emerge to tell us that this is the biggest constitutional outrage, oblivious to the fact that one of their colleagues has called for the prorogation of Parliament to get through a hard Brexit and has also called for a no-confidence vote in the government from which he still takes the whip. The fact is that we are seeking a compromise. I voted for the withdrawal agreement. It's been supported by Gove, Leadsom, Fox, Grayling, Lee, all people whose Brexit credentials cannot be second-guessed. For those who worry about the manifesto, it accords with the manifesto. But if we can't have the withdrawal agreement, we need a reasonable way to leave the European Union and deliver on Brexit. If you look at what the Brexiteers said during the Leave campaign, Norway was on the table, Switzerland was on the table, EFTA was on the table. This House wants to leave with a deal, but if we don't show tonight that we're in favour of a deal, I can guarantee you my colleagues will do their level best in the next 2 weeks to drive through a hard, no-deal Brexit.
Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My remarks will be very brief tonight, and I'll be just explaining why Plaid Cymru will be supporting only one option and two procedures as we see potential solutions to this Brexit deadlock. The Prime Minister is insisting on bringing forward the same votes on her botched deal, only for the House, I think, to reject it again, as has happened twice already. So we believe it is essential to hold the people's votes on the final deal. Ultimately, it must be a question of deciding between the arrangements that we know and which have worked well, though not perfectly, for several decades, and what those advocating change can devise. As it is clear, there is no agreement on what that alternative might be, but what was started by a vote of the people must, I think, be ended by a vote by the people. So we will be supporting the motion in the name of the Honourable Member for Hove tonight. The best option for Wales is undoubtedly to remain within the European Union, with our economy heavily dependent on being able to export tariff-free to the European Union. Leaving that union would be damaging for the Welsh economy, and it is our responsibility as Plaid Cymru, the party of Wales, to mitigate this as much as we can, as much as is possible. Therefore, we will also be supporting the motion in the name of the member for Grantham and Stamford, which would continue to ensure membership of the single market and a form of customs union, protecting jobs, protecting workers' rights and protecting our economy. It is indeed strikingly similar to proposals entitled Securing Wales's Future, which we brought forward some 2 years ago, largely the fine work of our late friend Steffan Lewis AM, whose untimely death this year deprived us of a great future prospect for our politics. As I said, if this is the final position adopted, it is imperative that this too is put to a people's vote. It is essential that we have a means of protection against crashing out of the European Union with no deal at all. The first step to protect against this must be a meaningful extension of Article 50. This has to be obtained from the European Union, but were this to be refused, and I think that is unlikely, it must be up to this House to choose between no-deal Brexit, which we have already rejected, and revoking Article 50 and stopping this careering train in its tracks. Therefore, we will be supporting the amendments in the name of my friend, the Honourable and Learned Member for Edinburgh South West. Thank you.
Thank you. Last speech at 4 minutes, Greg Hands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm starting off by answering my right honourable friend, the member for Rushcliffe, I think, who said he hadn't heard a single argument against a customs union. But I give him credit for staying for the whole debate, because I'm going to give him plenty. He mentioned that, Mr. Speaker, I've been involved in a filibuster, and I counted my contribution to the Business of the House motion at 1 minute 13 seconds. Now, Mr. Speaker, that must be perhaps the shortest filibuster there's ever been. I did once speak for 1 hour 43 minutes on beer duty, but I think 1 minute 13 doesn't really count. So why, Mr. Speaker, is a customs union a very bad idea? Broadly speaking, huge loss of control over our own economic policy, a decline on our foreign policy influence, and a huge democratic deficit. Trade policy, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is not just about trade deals. It is about much more that we would be handing over to the European Union without a seat at the table. There's tariffs, there is remedies, there is preferences, as well as trade agreements. All of this, Mr. Speaker, would be given over. The House of Commons would abrogate its responsibility in relation to the UK's trade policy. And this is not Andorra or San Marino, which are in customs unions at the moment with the European Union. This is the world's 5th largest economy. Now, he and I were on the same side in the referendum in 2016, so I'm not approaching this as some kind of Brexiteer. I'm approaching this, Mr. Speaker, as what makes sense for the UK for our trade policy. And it makes no sense in our democracy for this House of Commons tonight to vote to hand over control of UK trade policy to Brussels. That would mean that a Maltese commissioner, a Latvian MEP, a Portuguese commissioner, a Slovene MEP, they would all have more say over UK trade policy than any elected UK politician. That would include the UK Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. They would have more say over it. That is not democratically sustainable, nor is it sustainable for our foreign policy. He and I served in government together. And I went into various rooms, Mr. Speaker, in foreign countries, speaking to foreign governments. And trade is one of the aspects of leverage that you have. When we're members of the European Union, that will mean the UK's influence on EU trade policy. That is obviously going to be gone, but we'll have no influence over our own trade policy. We will be unable to have those conversations with the government of the United States and say, well, actually, if we can do this on some other area, we will have a word in Brussels on this particular trade issue. All of that will be good. Well, I'm not, because unlike my right honourable friend, I'll take an extra minute, yes.
I get you an extra minute, yeah. I'm very grateful, because I didn't have time to give way to him. But to say the British government, if we moved into a customs union, would have as little influence over deals being negotiated by the EU as a Latvian MP, I think you'll acknowledge is a slight exaggeration. And as the spokesman for the opposition has said, a big economy like ours would be add to the attractions of the EU market with a negotiating partner, we surely could put in place a structure giving us far more consultation, far more involvement in the negotiations than he is describing. Not as good as now, but perfectly adequate.
I think on his part, I have to say, I think that is wishful thinking. The European Union is highly likely to prioritise the interests of its members versus the interests of the non-members. That has always been the case. Also, there's serious arguments as to whether European Union rules would even allow a non-member to be of influence on EU trade policy. I'm afraid that is just a fact. So, Mr. Speaker, democratically unsustainable. On tariffs, we've got a position, Mr. Speaker, where tariffs will be set by people who are not accountable to this House or to our constituents. That could be very damaging. It could be damaging on goods coming into the country, where they set high tariffs on goods that our consumers would quite like to get access to. Or it could happen the other way round, with things like trade remedies, Mr. Speaker, which is briefly mentioned. Incredibly important. Trade defences. All of this would be handed over to Brussels. Now, Brussels might look after our trade remedies, but they would not give it priority. They would give the defence of their own industries, the fee-paying members of the European Union, the priority over countries like ours. So those all-important WTO investigations into, say, the UK ceramics industry, those would be relegated below investigations to protect, say, the German or Dutch steel industries. Mr. Speaker, on trade deals, you've got the case, the Turkey trap it is talked about. This is the asymmetry. The EU would offer access to our 65 million consumers without being able to achieve necessarily anything in return. And you can guarantee it that the UK asks would be the ones that will be dropped first, and the UK items of defence would be the ones the EU would concede first. That is inevitable, because we would not be a fee-paying member of the European Union. We would not be a priority for them. I'll give way, yes.
Saved him from the clock. I'm listening very carefully to my other friend, and I have a lot of respect for him, and I have read his article, and I've listened to every speech so far during today's debate. I understand what he doesn't want, which is the customs union. But bearing in mind that Parliament has yet to decide what it does, has rejected all other options, and the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement and political declaration, what is he arguing for?
I continue to argue, Mr. Speaker, for the Prime Minister's agreement, and that is where I think that we should head. I think that is the best compromise. People talk about a compromise. That is the best compromise that he and I have both voted for. Mr. Speaker, on a couple of other points in relation to trade agreements, I was astonished that the Labour front bench is supporting this idea of handing over our trade policy. They were the people most passionately against TTIP and other trade agreements due to the access it would supposedly have given foreign companies to the NHS. As it happens, Mr. Speaker, I don't buy into that idea. But the idea that now it's going to be fine because we're handing over trade policy to the EU, but we don't have a seat at the table, that, I'm afraid, is for the birds. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I think in terms of trade policy, I think it was Senator Elizabeth Warren who said, if you don't have a seat at the table, you're likely to be on the menu. And that is exactly what I fear will happen in an EU customs union if option C is passed this evening.
Thank you very much. Stephen Gethin.
Mr. Speaker, I think it has been a good debate, and I'd like to pay tribute to members, not least the member for Dorset West, in terms of his innovation, and other members in the way in which they have engaged in this process. But let's be clear in all this. Every day I am more and more pleased that Scots voted overwhelmingly to remain in the EU. We could have walked away from all of this, washed our hands of it, and said it was nothing to do with us. But we must engage, and we have done every single step of this sad, sorry process. Mr. Speaker, there are no winners from this tragedy of epic proportions. This is a horror show, and this is all about us trying to make things less bad rather than better.
Absolutely.
But one thing that has come out of this is that this is a government that seems to be uniquely bad at minority government and uniquely bad at reaching out to other parties, and this process is forcing us to talk to each other in a more meaningful way. Now, the SNP did not vote for an EU referendum. We did not vote to trigger Article 50. and we can see why. I'm pro-European. It's a force for good that's made us wealthier, safer, greener and fairer. I'm somebody who has benefited from our membership, from freedom of movement, Erasmus and the privileges and rights that we have as European citizens. But we have to engage in what you, Mr Speaker, were right to call part of a process. So in terms of the first, can I first of all congratulate my honourable and learned friend, the member for Edinburgh South West, for her proposal. It is a responsible proposal. And frankly, I think anybody who is opposing this tonight is being irresponsible. No deal is a dangerous Brexit. It is a damaging Brexit. And for those who call it a clean Brexit, I say this. It is the messiest Brexit possible. But this is also the best option, the reason we will back it. It is the amendment to revoke Article 50 as the reset clause. And frankly, I'm astonished that the Labour Party haven't been able to support this tonight. And I have to say that disappointed is the least possible I can say on that. We're also in favour of a people's vote, and I'd like to support the member for Hove. And as somebody who wants to campaign to remain in the EU, I would look forward to doing so. Can I just make reference to the for the member for Grantham and Stamford and pay tribute to the way that he has engaged with us in this process? I hope he doesn't mind me saying that I want to remain in the EU, he wants to leave. We disagree profoundly on many issues, but the way in which he's tried to engage with us, I was very, very grateful for, and I know my honourable friends were very, very grateful for the way that he's conducted this as well. We'd like to see a referendum. I also think a long extension is the right way to take these things forward as well. But in particular reference to his reassurances around freedom of movement and the particular situation in which Scotland finds itself has been incredibly important to us, and I would like to acknowledge that. That's not a wholehearted endorsement, and as he rightly pointed out, there will be a time further down the line, hopefully, when there are amendments and other purposes to that as well. But, Mr Speaker, we can no longer be held hostage by a small band of Tory extremists on this. Now, this is not the end of the line today. This is not the end of the line. I would appeal that members support the motion in the name of my honourable friend, the member for Edinburgh South West. But in conclusion, we must find a way forward. We should rightly be debating poverty, climate change, austerity. Instead, we are focused on the least worst options and damage limitation. We shouldn't be doing that. And it's time for us to put this Brexit nightmare behind us.
George Eustace.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. For some time I favoured...
Honourable gentleman's pardon. My apologies to the honourable gentleman. A 3-minute limit now applies, as the honourable gentleman was advised earlier. George Eustace.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. For some time I favoured a simpler and swifter Brexit, based on us leaving the European Union but rejoining the European Free Trade Association, and in so doing making our existing rights and obligations as a signatory to the treaty establishing the EEA operable. It would mean that we would have no customs union, would have an independent trade policy, would be outside the CFP, outside the CAP, but would accept regulatory alignment to reduce border friction. My particular amendment, Mr Speaker, was not selected, but I can say that this evening I will now support motion D, in the name of my honourable friend, the member for Grantham and Stamford, the so-called Common Market 2.0 option, for reasons I will come on to. But, Mr Speaker, there were two ways of addressing this issue of Brexit. One was to self-confidently resolve from the beginning that we would leave as a third country and prepare on that basis and be willing to leave without an agreement if necessary, and I would have supported the Prime Minister in that had she seen that through. But if it was the case that the Cabinet always believed that we could not leave without a deal, then they had to recognise that that would require significant compromise with the EU, which in turn would require the development of a cross-party consensus in this House. Now that the Prime Minister and her Cabinet have signalled that they are unwilling to leave under a no-deal scenario, we must try to secure a consensus. Last Friday, the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement was defeated for a third time, but the vast majority of members on this side of the House voted for the withdrawal agreement, albeit unenthusiastically in many cases. And my contention this evening is that those honourable members who were willing to take a second look at the withdrawal agreement should also take a second look at Common Market 2.0. Because certainly it envisages a temporary customs union, but so does the withdrawal agreement. First through the implementation period, then through a probable extension to the implementation period, then finally through the backstop. The motion also envisages some regulatory alignment through membership of EFTA and the EEA. But this would be dealt with expeditiously under this motion. Under the withdrawal agreement, the UK is already committed to align its regulations in relevant areas, and the extent to which we have border checks would be dependent on any divergence from that. So, in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I believe that this option does provide a way to compromise, a way forward for this House. I believe it's far preferable to option C, motion C, the proposal for a customs union, which, as honourable members have pointed out, doesn't make sense for an independent country such as this. It means that we would have our commercial interests traded away in terms of getting interest for other countries, and it wouldn't solve the border issues.
Thank you. Ben Bradshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While the headlines that greeted last week's indicative votes about a shambles and chaos were painfully ridiculous, given it was the first time we were given the opportunity to discuss these after 2.5 years of the government failing to get a consensus, I do think it would be helpful if we made progress today, and that, as other members have said, is going to involve all of us, not just sticking to our first preference, but voting for our second preference, and indeed any preference that we can live with. And that's certainly something I shall be doing. I shall be supporting Labour's unanimously agreed conference policy in favour of a public vote, and I am also minded to support the motion in the name of the Father of the House. But I do, and other members do, have concern about this and about the length of the extension, because what I do not want to happen is for the Prime Minister to pocket this, add it to her political declaration and take us out of the European Union on May the 22nd. I don't think that would be acceptable. I have similar concerns about the motion in the name of the Honourable Member for Grantham. It's better, it takes away all the stuff about the free movement of Labour, but it still only has a temporary customs union, and it still could be bagged by the Prime Minister, added to the political declaration, and will be out within a few weeks. I give way to the Right Honourable Member.
Very grateful to the Right Honourable Member, but I hope you'll recognise that actually the only way in which the government can carry this forward, if there is a cross-party consensus, is to bring in something like the Withdrawal Act Implementation Bill, which gives his party the opportunity to seek to amend it, no doubt with much support around the House, in order to prevent the eventualities he's talking about.
I very much hope that he is right, and I do take his point on that. The other point I wanted to make was absolutely to agree with my right honourable member, the member for Derby. My view is that if we get progress today, and if we get a majority on one or more of these options, basing the future of our country on a majority that has been agreed in Parliament among members of Parliament for whom it might not have been their first but might have been their second or third preferences, will not only lack long-term legitimacy, but it will also lack sustainability. It will be impossible for us as a House or for any government to take this forward without it being ratified in a confirmatory vote by the British public. And that's why I think whatever happens tonight, we are going to have to accept the principle that the Brexit that is now on offer is so different from the Brexit that was offered in 2016 that it would be undemocratic and unlegitimate not to give the people a final say on it. And I want to say one last thing about the motion in the name of the honourable and learned member for Edinburgh South West. I will be supporting this motion, and as I said earlier, I cannot see any reason for anybody, unless those who actively want a no-deal Brexit, not to support this motion tonight. I'd hoped our front bench might support it. I hope it will on Wednesday if it comes to that. But we have to have an insurance policy against a no-deal, crash-out Brexit. More than 6 million members of our community are demanding it, and I would urge all honourable members on both sides of this House, it's only a recommendation on our side, to vote for this and to do so with enthusiasm.
John Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will be short and to the point. Let's go back to first principles. What was the referendum question about? It was about our membership of the EU. This country decided to revoke that membership, and therefore we must implement that decision. By doing so, we effectively become a sovereign, independent nation. Any sovereign, independent nation gets involved in international relations. We do through our membership of NATO, which has obligations and benefits. We are also members of the United Nations, which has responsibilities and also clear benefits, and interestingly, we also make a financial contribution. So as an independent sovereign nation, we will clearly want to enter into free trade agreements. Logic would dictate that we should start with the 30th closest countries which are in Europe, and they are our main trading partners, 55% of our trade. Any agreement we would want: no tariffs, we would want regulatory alignment, a market of 500 million people, some of the richest in the world. We would like agriculture and fisheries to be excluded, and we want to make sure that there was a fair competition policy and state aid rules to be fair to all the participants. What a wonderful opportunity for our businesses, some real benefits for our country. But clearly there may be some obligations, quite rightly there should be. What about payments, contributions? Quite rightly, we would make contributions to the actual institutions. We might even make contributions to poorer regions to help them develop. But there would be a very significant saving from the amount we pay in relation to our present arrangements. What about free movement? Yes, we have to accept that there might be free movement, but that's something we may in fact want, because we need employees for our NHS, we want workers during the summer, we want the opportunity to tap in to that sort of employment base that is in Europe. But under this agreement, we would also have an emergency brake. So if circumstances were such that we wanted to curtail immigration, we would be in a position to do so. What about changing the rules? Quite clearly, under any agreement, there would have to be the ability to change rules, and we'd have to accept them. However, we could be right in at the beginning, helping to frame those rules and make sure that they were ones that we could tolerate. But interesting, as an independent sovereign nation, the only way those rules could be implemented would be through an Act of Parliament in this House. No other body could impose those rules upon us. But what if any of this is ultimately unacceptable to us? We might just say we're not going to enact those policies because we are a sovereign parliament and we're not willing to do so. We might enter into a negotiation with those countries and try and see if we can come to some arrangement, or as an independent country we could give 1 year's notice and leave. Mr. Speaker, this is quite clearly, in my view, the best possible outcome. It confirms our revocation of our membership of the EU, but we'd be part of what I consider the best free trade arrangement that there is.
Whilst many have lauded this exercise today, I think that we've got to bear in mind that we are having a hurried discussion about a wide range of solutions, when this House at one stage even claimed that the 5 days and all of the committee scrutiny and all of the questions and all of the statements which there was to be in place of the government's proposal was not enough. And yet here we are today, and of course people would say, well, it's not their fault, it's the government's fault, but nevertheless, let's not pretend that we're going to reach a conclusion on the issues before us today with having taken any significant debate on the issue or having scrutinised the issues. As far as the DUP are concerned, we look at all of the options before us on two grounds. First of all, do they deal with the toxic issue of the backstop? And secondly, will they deliver on what people voted for in the referendum? And I've got to say, when I look at the options which are before us, and we've already had the exchanges in the Customs Union, the Customs Union option would still not deal in EU terms, and the terms which they have led the issues out in the withdrawal agreement would not deal with the EU's objections to the problems along the Irish border. And as far as the proposal in the name of the member for Grantham and Stamford, that equally would not deal with the issue, because of course, since there is uncertainty about what the future would be in relation to whether we'd stay fully in the single market or whatever, the EU have made it quite clear that where there is uncertainty, they will require that the backstop be in place. And indeed, the withdrawal agreement makes it clear that even if the backstop were to be removed, it could be in all or in part, depending on how they judged what the settlement would be. I will give way, yes, I'll give way.
I'm very, very grateful. Does he also recall that actually being in a customs union is not a frictionless state. It would require physical movement certificates on every consignment. There'd be export declarations, import VAT, up to 200 million transactions per annum. That's not frictionless trade.
And you know, for those reasons, it does not. The solutions before us tonight do not deal with the backstop. Now, some people would say, well, of course, there is no solution other than staying in the EU that deals with the backstop. I don't accept that. And I don't accept it because, first of all, of current practice, and secondly, because of what the EU have said themselves about what would happen in the case of no deal, where they have argued that they do not need to have barriers along the border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic.
I think I agree with him that in addition to a customs union, you probably need some small regulatory, some modest regulatory alignments, so the open borders existed in Ireland and at Dover. But the regulatory alignment would be the same for the whole of the United Kingdom. And I thought that the DUP's objection to the backstop was it put in place different arrangements for Northern Ireland from the rest of UK, putting a barrier down the Irish Sea. Motion C avoids that.
I said there were two criteria. First of all, did it deal with the issue of difference between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom? And secondly, would it deliver on what people voted for when they voted to leave the EU? And of course, if we stay in the customs union or a customs union arrangement, if we stay with the degree of regulatory alignment which is required, then of course that would not deliver on what people have voted for. And could just maybe deal with the amendment regarding the confirmatory public vote. And the option which is emerging here today would be we would put a deal to the people, probably a deal to the people of the United Kingdom based on whatever compromise solution came from this Remain Parliament, or we would vote to remain. Now that, quite frankly, is not a choice. That is not the choice that the vast majority of people who voted to leave the EU is concerned. Remain or half remain. People voted the first time to leave. And therefore, even the idea that somehow or other we're giving people a choice is would not be acceptable. And as far as the Scottish National Amendment is concerned, well, I think that it's clearly simply an attempt, because they've made no secret of where they stand in this, that they wish to stay in the EU. They wish to ensure that that situation is provided for, and for those reasons we would not vote for that amendment either. So tonight we will not be supporting any of these arrangements. One, because they do not safeguard the issue of the Union, and two, because they do not deliver on Brexit.
Alphon. Common Market 2.0 is a strong Brexit, a workers' Brexit, a no backstop Brexit, and a Eurosceptic Brexit. We'd be out of the political union, out of the common fisheries policy, out of the farming policy, out of home affairs and taxation. We'd leave the jurisdiction of the ECJ and regain our sovereignty and take back control. And we would not be rule takers. Sitting on the EEA Joint Committee, we can delay, adapt or derogate from any single market law or directive. EFTA states have secured over 1,100 derogations and adaptations. Norway and Iceland alone have derogated from EU law on more than 400 occasions between them. We'd have much greater involvement in the law-making process, with the right to be consulted on any new EU single market law. Of course.
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way, and I'd like to congratulate him and his colleagues for the intelligent work that they've done on promoting Common Market 2.0, and to other right honourable members for the debate today and the sensible compromises which have been brought forward. Would he agree with me, Mr. Speaker, if you'll just bear with me, would he agree with me that it would be much better for all concerned if this was properly discussed by this House 2 years ago to help shape our negotiations with the EU?
Well, my honourable friend is right, and of course hindsight is a wonderful thing. Now, furthermore, under Common Market 2.0, the UK would regain its seat at global bodies such as the WTO, so we'd be able to shape the global standards that are the basis for many EU and EEA laws. and as an EFTA member, we take back some control over immigration. Article 12 of the EEA agreement gives us important safeguards that would allow Britain to unilaterally take appropriate measures. And Article 28.3 would allow us to apply brakes on grounds of public policy, security or health. And we'd be able to do our own trade deals outside of the EU. EFTA states have 27 deals with 43 other countries. But at the same time, Common Market 2.0 is a workers' Brexit, because we keep the high standards workers' rights on annual leave, equal pay, maternity and parental leave and many other things. And we'd be aligned to the single market, safeguarding our economy, our businesses and our jobs. It's a no backstop Brexit, because Common Market 2.0 can be negotiated before the end of the transition period, meaning the backstop would never need to be activated. And the former president of the EFTA court, Karl Baudenbacher, stated in an interview that Norway-style deal could solve our issues around the backstop. There's also no backstop because we would mirror customs union arrangements until the frictionless border is solved. But it's a unifying Brexit. Common Market 2.0 brings together the support of Remainers and Leavers across the parties, from the Honourable Member for Cambourne to the Member for Brigham Gall to the members from Manchester Central and Aberystwyth. King's College London University report about changing attitudes to Brexit shows that the most popular option is a Norway-style deal, and it's gaining traction. Since 2017, support for EFTA has increased to 43%, and among Leave voters, 34% opted for EEA option in 2018, up from 24% in 2017. It's been supported in the past by many principled Eurosceptics. I won't give way because there are a lot of others who need to speak. Just in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the government said last week that we leave the European Economic Area automatically when we leave the EU. Yet in a January 2017 application for a judicial review of exactly this issue, the government conceded in court at paragraph 16D of its legal submission that the legal position argued by the applicant, Mr. Adrian Yallen, that we do not leave the EEA automatically, but by giving an Article 127 notice was in fact correct. And the government's legal submission states, for the avoidance of doubt, the Secretary does not rely on Article 126 as giving rise to the termination of the EEA agreement. So this is an agreement that can, Common Market 2.0 is a Brexit that can unite the Conservative Party, unite the country, unite Parliament. It's a Brexit that is for everyone.
A 2-minute limit now, please. Lucy Powell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow my friend, the member for Halfon. He and I actually come at this. He and I come at this from very different perspectives. I represent a constituency that voted Remain, and I campaigned for Remain, but we have reached some of the same conclusions, although we come at it from a very different place. And I think that's what today is about. It is about that spirit of compromise, that spirit of trade-off, and that spirit of working out what it is that each of us can actually live with, not what we would prefer, our preferred option. I'm going to vote for all the options on the table today, even though I'm sceptical about some of them. Because my biggest fear, Mr. Speaker, my absolute biggest fear at this stage is that we are going to be heading for no-deal Brexit on the 12th of April unless this House can come to a view about something that it is for. Ideally more than one thing, but at least something that it is for. And I think it's highly unlikely that the EU would give us a longer extension or would even contemplate that if we are still locked in this indecision vortex that we've been locked in for so long. So everything does have its trade-offs, and I think not least when you actually put forward a complex compromise position that has been so carefully put together by my friend, the member for Grantham and Stamford and others, it's very easy to take target at different points in that to say I'm against that little bit, I'm against that little bit, and therefore I'm not going to vote for it. Nothing is perfect. Everything is about trade-off. So I would just, again, as I did last week, say to colleagues, that we just need to all hold our noses about a number of things we might have concerns about, because we have to break this deadlock before we crash out a week on Thursday with no deal.
Mrs Anne Main.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. We're being urged tonight to seek compromise, and yet it's not surprising to note that I think it was only 5 members of the Labour Party voted for the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement. And I changed my vote for that because I could see this coming down the road at me. It's a very imperfect beast, and I've had a lot of criticisms about it. But tonight's vote shows you I don't wish to vote for any of the options on the table, but I'm asked to choose one. Well, I chose the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement, and interestingly, 2 of the votes tonight will require a withdrawal agreement, as the honourable member alluded to. So C and D do not give us freedom of movement. They do not give us control over our immigration. I'm surprised to hear the 2 members who are advocating it talking about breaks. That is rather weasel words in my view, and I'm sorry to have to say that, but trying to reassure the SNP that they can have as many people coming over for freedom of movement by reassuring other members of the Labour Party they've got brakes on, that's playing both ends against the middle. The reality will be we will have very unlikely to have control over our migration policy, and if that is what honourable members want, then fine, but I don't think that's what came out in the debates. I am absolutely against a second referendum. I absolutely do not believe that we would be asking the same question for all intents and purposes. It would be a completely different referendum this time around. I don't know how anybody could explain on the doorstep why they chose to ignore the too difficult question of implementing the referendum. And I just would like to read these words to you because I agree with every one of them. 33.5 million people vote to cast the vote, 72% of the electorate, turnout at a level not seen since the 1922 election. No matter which side of the argument won, it was inevitable there'd be people left disappointed. That's the nature of debate, elections and referendums. It's fundamentally undemocratic to argue the process should be rerun because the outcome was not what some people wanted. Arguments of turnout, majority or accuracy or otherwise as statements made throughout the course of the campaign do not invalidate the result. Your words, Mr Speaker, and I agree with every single one of them.
As politicians, we practice the art of politics, and the art of politics is the art of compromise. I've sat here now for 4.5 hours, and that is the #1 word. That's the most commonest word that's been used over the past 4.5 hours is compromise, because it's through compromise that we get progress. And we've had no progress for nearly 3 years. And I think one of the main reasons behind that is the hubris, the arrogance and the overconfidence of the Prime Minister and the former Prime Minister and leading Conservatives. And I go back to David Cameron when he decided to call for a referendum. Jean-Claude Juncker said to him, "Why have you done this?" He said, "Don't worry, I can deliver a 66% yes vote." Juncker said to him, "I couldn't get that in Luxembourg." There was hubris by the Prime Minister when she called for the election in 2017, and I'm not criticising her for that. By calling for that election, she allowed me to get back in through the back door. But she thought she was going to get a majority of 160, and she lost her majority. And it was said by the Chief Whip today, she should have took cognizance, she should have took recognition of the result of that election. And I think he's a very wise man in saying that, and I congratulate him, a very brave man indeed. But that hubris was practised also by her ministers. Who remembers these quotes? Who remembers these quotes? The Brexit negotiations will take 10 minutes. Peter Lilly. The free trade agreement that we will do with the EU should be one of the easiest in human history. The Right Honourable Member for North Somerset. So the election result was very, very close. She could have reached out across the chamber, across the country. She failed to do so, and that's why we're here today. So I urge all members to vote for compromise tonight. I'm going to be voting for the 4 options put before us, and I ask other members to do so.
Mr Speaker, there are huge divisions in our country, and though I voted Remain, I don't support a second referendum or revoking previous decisions because I don't think that that would heal our divisions. But having no deal with our largest trading partner is unacceptable. It brings huge risk to our economy and brings uncertainty on the Irish border. I voted 3 times for the Prime Minister's deal. It's a bespoke deal, and to me it is the best option. But it has failed 3 times. saying no to everything doesn't work. We need a compromise, and I will support a customs union this evening. That is not the same as the customs union we are in today. You could be in a customs union, but out of the CFP, out of the Common Agricultural Policy, and out of free movement. All of these were big issues in the referendum. Yes, we would follow the same tariffs on goods, but we wouldn't have to follow the same regulation on goods. And on services, the key part of our economy, we would be free to have our own regulations and free to have our own trade deals with other parts of the world. It does not involve handing over our trade policy to Brussels, because a country, Britain's side, would influence Brussels policy, and even Turkey retains its own say on trade sanctions. But, Mr. Speaker, fundamentally, the issue here is deliverability. We could be in a customs union, combine that with the withdrawal agreement, and deal with it all on the future framework. This could all be done by May the 22nd, and we would not need to have ever extensions or another European election.
Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the honourable member for Chelmsford, and there, I suggest, is the real rub of what is going on, or the danger we face tonight if we don't look at what's behind what seems like a lot of sensible compromise, because my real fear is whatever we vote for, unless it's E and G, which I will vote for, then the government will, as the honourable member for Exeter put it in the bag, put forward yet again for another vote the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement, and slip into the political declaration either the customs union or the so-called common market too. I won't vote for the customs union because it doesn't deliver the frictionless trade that our manufacturing section desperately needs. And my concern about option or motion D is exactly that. And the honourable gentleman says compromise, and I hear exactly what he says, but it wouldn't be in the withdrawal.
Order. Thank you. Colleagues, voting forms are available from the vote office and in the division lobbies. Voting, as colleagues will know, is about to start at the end of this statement/announcement and will continue for 30 minutes from the moment it starts. I'll repeat now what I said the other day for the avoidance of doubt and for the sake of clarity. The forms look very similar to deferred division forms, except that they're blue, and they will list the title and letter of the selected motions. The text of the motions is in the order paper. Colleagues, members with surnames from A to K should hand their forms in the I lobby at the relevant desk for their surname, and members with surnames from L to Z should hand in their forms in the no lobby at the relevant desk. As with deferred divisions, members may not, I repeat, members may not vote aye and no to the same motion. If this happens, the vote will not be counted. As with deferred divisions, members may not hand in forms on behalf of other members. Each member must hand in his or her own form. Members with proxy votes in operation will need to get their nominated proxy to hand in their form. A short note is available in the vote office confirming these arrangements. I will announce the results in the chamber as soon as they're ready. Those results will be published in the same way as deferred divisions on the Commons Debates website and app, and in Hansard, showing how each honourable member voted on each motion. Voting is due to start now, and colleagues have 30 minutes to cast their votes. The sitting is suspended. Order. Order.
Okay, the sitting has been suspended in the House of Commons in Westminster, and the MPs are going to go out and do their voting, and it's all by voting slip. Now, just to recap, we're sort of carrying on from where we were on Wednesday. And I don't know if anybody stayed the whole show Wednesday, but here we are Monday the 1st of April, and it's all about indicative votes. It's all about trying to find a consensus within the Parliament. So they had 8 different votes on Wednesday, and from those they've taken the ones that were popular, and the Speaker's thought about it, and he's brought today forward 4 different motions, and they're quite interesting. But what's been really interesting in watching the debate was how people wanted to find a consensus and how they wanted to find a way forward. And it was very positive, and it was really very nice to watch. The only negative parts came when the government spokesman came in and started to push his agenda forward. But that was obviously for him to do because that's what he meant to do. So let's go through these motions. We've got Kenneth Clarke's one first of all, and that's a customs union. We might just say a simple customs union, but I'll read it out to you. It's this House instructs the government to ensure that any withdrawal agreement and political declaration negotiated with the EU must include as a minimum a commitment to negotiate a permanent and comprehensive UK-wide customs union with the EU, enshrined this objective in primary legislation. So that's the first thing. That's just a customs union. It means we can trade our goods across the world. And it really doesn't go for the services. The services is the biggest part of the UK economy, and it's not regulated in that fashion by this thing. So the UK would be free to do what it likes abroad with most of that. I think Kenneth Clarke went into this in a lot of detail when he was putting forward this motion, and he said lots of different things about the goods being different from the services, and he said that it doesn't really affect much of our goods either, because he'd been involved in lots of trade negotiations. He said that the United States was particularly problematic because they would want to lower the standards to bring and it wasn't so much about the tariffs, but more about the regulations of what goods can be bought in under what circumstances, and if it's this thick metal or if it's that thinner piece of cardboard. Those things are the things that really buckle the trade road and take the smoothness out of it. So that's Kenneth Clarke's first one. And then we move to Nick Bowles, and his notion is to have a sort of common market too. For those of you old enough, you remember that when we started with the European Union, it was the common market, and it's kind of going back towards that, I suppose. And his motion is to renegotiate the framework for a future relationship laid before the House on Monday the 11th of March 2019 with the title Political Declaration, setting out a framework for the future relationship between the European Union and the United Kingdom to provide that on the conclusion of the implementation period, and no later than the 31st of December 2020, the United Kingdom shall accede to the European Free Trade Association, EFTA, having negotiated a derogation of Article 56, bracket 3 of the EFTA agreement to allow UK participation in a comprehensive customs arrangement with the European Union. And B, enter the EFTA pillar of the European Economic Area, EEA, and thereby render operational the United Kingdom's continuing status as a party to the EEA agreement and continuing participation in the single market. C, to agree relevant protocols relating to frictionless agri-food trade across the UK and EU border. And E, enter a comprehensive customs arrangement including a common external tariff alignment with the Union Customs Code and an agreement on commercial policy, which includes the UK a say in the future of EU trade deals, at least until the alternative arrangements that maintain frictionless trade with the European Union and no hard border on the island of Ireland have been agreed with the European Union. And the second part, this one, it says negotiate with the EU a legally binding joint instrument that confirms that in accordance with Article 2 of the Protocol of Ireland, Northern Ireland, of the Withdrawal Agreement, the implementation of all the provisions of paragraph 1 of this motion would cause the Protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland, to be suspended in full. And the second part, the total second part of this is resolved resolves to make a support of the forthcoming European Union withdrawal agreement bill conditional upon the inclusion of provisions for the political declaration revised in accordance with the provisions of this motion to be legally binding, negotiating the mandate for Her Majesty's government in the forthcoming negotiation of the future relationship between the United Kingdom and the European Union. So Mr. Bowles, he spoke eloquently, pushing forward his thing. And it was interesting to me when I heard this part of the debate that John Redwood, who's a very staunch Brexiteer, was prepared to support this. Now, when we're talking about, we've talked about two of these so far, MPs are now in a free vote, and they can go and they can vote for all of these motions. All of them. It's not one against the other. It's not pitted this against that. They can vote for every single one if they want to, and see what the outcome of that would be. So we're going to move now to the next one of these motions, and this is. Hang on, I think it's probably going to be Joanna's. Yes, I beg your pardon. We get all these pieces of paper. You know, unlike the big television stations, we work on a small team, and we have to do the best we can with it. Maybe I'll save Joanna Cherry's vote to the last one, the motion to the last one. There's Peter Kyle's first of all. This is a confirmatory public vote. This is what we were calling something the people's vote. We were trying to call this last time. It's got its merits, and Joanna Cherry's has got a public vote in a people's vote in that too. But let's do this one first. It's quite short and succinct. That this House will not allow in this Parliament the implementation and ratification of any withdrawal agreement and any framework for the future relationship unless and until they have been approved by the people of the United Kingdom in a confirmatory public vote. I think it's easily understood. So anything that they decide could come out of these items that we're discussing today, or if Mrs May finds some kind of way of bringing back her deal to the Parliament, and should it be voted on, they must take this back to the public and let them have a final say. Now, Joanna Cherry, SNP QC, Member of Parliament, has a much more complex motion, which is really another people's vote. And she was asked during the debate why it was so complex. And she gave good reason. She said that she doesn't want anything to be mishap here. We don't want this to fail because this is the final backstop. We cannot fall out of the European Union without a deal. And so she's worded this, and she is a QC, and she's had help with other attorneys to make sure that she's got this completely correct. So we have to deal with this quite carefully. So the first part of this is that if at midday on the second last day before the exit day, so I suppose that could mean the 10th of April. It's not long from now, 9 days. On the last day before the exit day, the conditions specified in section 13(1)(d) of the Act, the passing of legislation approving a withdrawal agreement, is not satisfied. So if Mrs May's agreement does not get satisfaction, it doesn't get passed, Her Majesty's government must immediately seek the agreement of the European Council under Article 50, Section D of the treaty, to extend the date upon which the treaty shall cease to apply to the United Kingdom. So that's the first part of this. If it's 2 days before we're about to leave, and Mrs May's agreement hasn't been passed, so the government must then ask for an extension to Article 50 beyond what we have already agreed. If at midday on the last day before the exit day, no agreement has been reached pursuant to 1 above, to extend the date upon which the treaties shall cease to apply to the United Kingdom, Her Majesty's government must immediately put a motion to the House of Commons asking it to approve no deal. Okay, so that's that. If at midday on the last day before exit day no agreement has been reached pursuant to 1 above, to extend the date upon which the treaty shall cease to apply to the United Kingdom, Her Majesty's government must immediately put a motion to the House of Commons asking it to approve no deal. 4. If the United Kingdom, noticed under the Article 50, is revoked pursuant to 3 above, a minister of Her Majesty's government shall cause an inquiry to be held under the Inquiries Act 2005 into the question whether a model of a future relationship with the European Union likely to be acceptable to the European Union is likely to have a majority support in the United Kingdom. 5. If there is a referendum shall be held on the question whether to trigger Article 50 and renegotiate that model. 6. The inquiry under paragraph 4 shall, within 3 months of revocation, and references in this motion to days are to the House of Commons sittings days, reference to the exit day, are reference to exit day as defined in the Act. References to the Act are to the European Union Withdrawal Act 2018, and references to the treaty are to the Treaty on the European Union. Whew, by George. Get to the bottom of that and get indigestion. But you know, in all this afternoon, we've been sitting here discussing things and watching the debate, and the deeper we come into this, the more depth we find. Because I'm not sure that many people in the House of Commons really know what they're dealing with. And indeed, if you start searching around and clicking on buttons on your browser in the internet, and you start to unravel what the European Union is, its very many different facets, the European Council, the Schengen area, the Nordic Council, the Visegrad Group, the Baltic Assembly, the Benelux. Now, Benelux is something that comes from my childhood. We learnt that in school, sitting there. We learnt about this little union of small countries, we were told, in the middle of Europe, who had a free area where they could travel one country to the other without stopping, and they were travelling and supplying goods to one another. And there's the common travel area, which is a small thing really, and compared to a lot of the other stuff we're talking about. And the common travel area is between Ireland and Northern Ireland. But it's something that's been in place for a long time. You've got EEA, you've got the European Customs Union, you've got the monetary agreement with the EU, you've got the Union State, and in the middle of this, I've not quite come to the bottom of this myself yet, but there's a picture of the flag and the word Guam written under it. And then there's another one here, this is BSEC, which is the Baltic Assembly. Now, here's a question I'm asking you at home, did you ever think that that was all a part of this? I bet you didn't. You know, I bet you 5 pence, maybe a little bit more, that you didn't know that was all involved in this. Anyway, it's maybe I should just run through a few of these things. We got see, let me go here. I've got so much stuff on here that it's right. I was going to start here. Just a quick rundown of the European Union. It's a political area of 28 member states at the moment, and the UK are trying to, some of the people in the UK want to try and withdraw that, so there'll only be 27 states. But at the present moment, with the UK, including us in Scotland, are members of the 28 members of the European Union. And that's a large area of land of 530 million people. It's an integral single market, and that's got standardized laws and policies. It has free movement of people, goods, services and capital within the internal market. And it covers legislation of justice, home affairs, the ECJ, which is the European Court of Justice, which we're all subject to and we can all go to. And so this is the overarching part of that. Of that, 19 members of this are in the European Currency Union. Now, we've got the European Economic Free Area, so it's EEA, and that was established in 1992. It's an international agreement which enables the extension of the European Union single market to non-EU member parties. And that is part of these motions that we're dealing with in the House of Commons today. Would we like to become a member of that? So these people are, these countries are not members, full members of the European Union, but they're associate members, if you like. They're just on the borders, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway. These people have similar things that they want to achieve, and they're prepared to be involved at the periphery of the European Union. And so let's move on. The Benelux, I mentioned that already. So let's find this other one here. So then we go to the European Free Trade Association. This is EFTA. It's a regional trade organisation, free trade area consisting of 4 European states: Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway and Switzerland. And this is an organisation which operates in parallel to the European Union, and all 4 member states participate in the European single market and are part of the Schengen area. They are not, however, a party to the European Union Customs Union. EFTA was historically one of the 2 dominant Western European trade blocs, but it's now much smaller and closely associated with its historical competitor, the European Union. It was established on May the 3rd, 1960. So we're breaking these things down a little bit now. You've got the Council of Europe. This is an international organisation whose stated aim is to uphold human rights, democracy, the rule of law. It was founded in 1949 and it has 47 member states, so far more than the European Union itself. The Schengen area, this is an area comprising of 26 European states. They've officially abolished all passport and all other types of border control, and they have mutual borders around the edges of that group of countries. This was an area, it was named after where the agreement was founded in 1985. Schengen is an area, if you go through Europe and you go down through Luxembourg, and you just come to the bottom of Luxembourg before you get into Germany, that's the village of Schengen, a town of Schengen, just there. And it says members of this area which are not members of the European Union. Bulgaria, Croatia, Cyprus, Romania. Oh, I beg your pardon. I got that wrong. The Bulgaria and Croatia are part of the European Union, but they're also in the Schengen area. I think I've missed out the wrong part here. We're getting a little bit overlapping here. I do beg your pardon. Anyway, so we're going to, let's find any more haven't done here. The Nordic Council, that's an official body of interparliamentary cooperation among Nordic countries, founded in 1952. And it has 87 representatives from Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and the Faroe Islands, Greenland, and Åland Islands, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so I don't know how we're getting on back in the Parliament down there. They're doing their votes. But what the idea of today's indicative votes was to try and draw people together and try and find a way forward from the impasse which has been dogging this Brexit process. Obviously, from the point of view of many people, the best form of Brexit is no Brexit. Donald Tusk has said this from the European Council. People in the SNP have said this time and time again. And I noticed earlier that our First Minister had made a comment to that thing. Let me just find that for you. It was just down here. Here it is. Nicola Sturgeon said today, the most important motion laid before the, she wants to say the House of Commons, but of course they've only got 140 characters. So she said, the most important motion laid today is the one from Joanna Cherry. It makes revoking Article 50 rather than the no-deal Brexit the default option of Parliament. If Parliament can't agree the way forward, I hope all parties will support it. Now, all parties, everybody in the House of Commons can support every single motion here if they want to. And some have said they will do. Some have said they won't. And they've obviously got their various different ideas of why they should and why they shouldn't. But you've got a customs union from Kenneth Clarke, which is kind of the absolute basic, and that does solve the Northern Ireland problem because it means that goods can be freely transported here, there and everywhere because we'd be a part of a whole. But there's no free movement with that one, and that satisfies quite a few of the Tories. There was a note there that 170 of the Brexiteer Tories have signed a letter asking Mrs May to simply go for a no-deal Brexit. And the Conservative MP who spoke that in the House of Commons this afternoon was quite surprised that not everybody had been made aware of this letter. He'd found out about it and he reported it to the House and obviously to us in the country. Well, us in Scotland, but us in the United Kingdom is what I suppose he meant. But it's quite a significant piece of news, I thought, at the time when I heard it. Rather goes against the grain. And of course, also today, you may recall, because it's had lots of publicity, and we've mentioned it here on Broadcasting Scotland, that there was a petition started, and it reached about 6 million votes. And that has been debated today in the Westminster Hall. I actually haven't found any reference to it as yet, what the outcome of that debate was. But that has been debated today. And obviously there's a great deal of feeling in the country about all this stuff. It's very, very important to us all. If you start to look at all the different things, and one thing I was reading last night, I actually started to read through Mrs May's withdrawal bill, and I made a few notes of it. And Article 5, quite early on in the withdrawal agreement, says, good faith, the Union, that's the European Union, and the United Kingdom shall, in full mutual respect and good faith, assist each other in carrying out the tasks which flow from this agreement. Now, this is Mrs. May's agreement, if we started to call it. And I read that and thought, in good faith. And yet, really, what a lot of the debate has been, it's been about the political declaration, and will they do this in good faith or won't they? But actually, it does state in this agreement, and I think that people have to do these things in good faith. It's not really possible not to. But we have to find agreements for so many things. When you start to get into the depths of all this, I'll go through some of the stuff here. I mean, there's all the different areas that the United Kingdom have historically come into contact with because of the empire, because of the Commonwealth. So this withdrawal from the European Union doesn't just affect the people of the islands of the United Kingdom, or the parts of the United Kingdom, the England, the Wales, the Northern Ireland, Scotland, and all the islands that go around it, but Gibraltar, which is a fairly easy thing for people to understand, I suppose, because it's been well thing. But the basis on Cyprus, Akrotiri, and Deucalion, there's also Malta, and this affects various different places in Poland and the Republic of Slovenia and Slovakia and the Cayman Islands, the Virgin Islands. I'm not reading them all out to you. St. Helena, right out there in the middle of the ocean, where Napoleon came to his end. Ascension Island, there's so much of it, and all of this stuff that we're dealing with today in the Parliament affects all of the people who live on those places. Then we've got citizens' rights, which are really up in the air at the moment. Nobody knows. I mean, people in the United Kingdom who've been living here, who've been born in other countries of the European Union, their rights have not been yet established, but they're being asked to sign up, and fortunately, the government did waive the fee. The residency rights. Now we're coming back to the Parliament now, and the Speaker's taking his chair. So Parliament's obviously out of suspension. People have come back in. It will take some time, of course, for the votes to be counted, because these are written on paper, and the Speaker did say you cannot go for and against the same thing, but if you do that, your vote won't be counted. You can choose yes or no, aye or no, but you cannot choose the both. But all right, so yes, I'm just looking, the Speaker's just chatting to someone there. He's not getting to his chair just yet. So the votes that they're looking at are for these motions. A customs union, which was Kenneth Clark's. Nick Bowles was a kind of a new customs, a new common market. And then Peter Carr was to make sure that anything that they agree goes back to the people, so it's a people's vote, a referendum, again, a confirmatory vote. People said, wouldn't that be divisive? And people said, wouldn't it be causing a lot of people to be upset and cross and everything? And Peter Carr said no, it would be probably the thing that would bring people back together.
Order. The voting period has now finished. I call the Minister or the Whip on duty to move motion number 3 on exiting the European Union (brackets animals) close brackets.
Not moved.
Not moved. Thank you. I call the Whip on duty to move motion number 4 on exiting the European Union (brackets protection of trading interests) close brackets.
Not moved.
Not moved. Thank you. We come now to motion 5 on constitutional law. Whip to move formally.
Not moved.
Thank you. Motion 6 on exiting the European Union (brackets environmental protection) close brackets. Whip to move.
Not moved.
Not moved. Thank you. On exiting the European Union, motion number 7 (brackets animals) close brackets. Whip to move.
Not moved.
Not moved. Thank you. These now come to motion number 8. I think it is. It says here number 5, but I think it's number 8. but we needn't have a division on that. Motion number 8, whether it's 8 or otherwise, relating to the Scottish Affairs Committee, Mr Bill Wiggins.
I beg to move.
Thank you. The question is as on the order papers. Question is as on the order papers. Members of their opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. I will now suspend the House until the outcomes of votes on motions relating to the United Kingdom's withdrawal from and future relationship with the European Union are available. The division bells will be rung 10 minutes before the House resumes. Order. Order.
Okay, so the House has been suspended again. There were several other motions on the order paper for today, but none of them were moved, and so they're just going to count the votes and people. But going back to the Peter Kyle with the confirmatory vote, there was a protest in the visitors' gallery during this thing, and there were quite a few jokes about it because I've now seen a photograph of what happened. Some members of the public, I dare say they were a group, but I'm not sure of what group they would be, but they did decide to take their clothes off in the public gallery. Now, those of you with long memories might remember back to 2004 when Tony Blair was still the Prime Minister, and some people took some flour up into that gallery. They coloured the flower purple, and they threw it from the public gallery down into the chamber. Well, after that, bulletproof glass was erected. So if you want to sit in the public gallery now, there's a quite thick sheet of glass between you and the actual Parliament chamber, so people cannot throw stuff down. But the picture I saw showed the backs of people, their bottoms showing to the House of Commons chamber, and we don't seem to have a picture of that to show you. Maybe you'd like to look it up yourself. But they were apparently gluing themselves to the glass screen. Apparently, I don't know how they unhitched themselves, but there were several jokes. Joanna Cherry said that the Prime Minister doesn't want to go naked into the chamber, and somebody said it's supposed to be the bottom line. But let's get back to the serious issues. But of course, those people must have been serious to do what they were doing. They were making their point. I suppose what the point was, I'm not sure. But getting back to Peter Kyle's confirmatory vote, he said that a public vote would not be divisive. He said if we set it up in the correct way, this can be the thing that heals, because we can take whatever the Parliament decide and put it against Mrs May's deal, for example, and offer people a deal of Mrs May's, or offer them what the Parliament have decided, or offer them to revoke, so they could have a clear choice, and it would be so he said he didn't think that this would be divisive, and he said he thought that this could bring the Parliament back together, and maybe the other vote to bring people back to a referendum was Joanna Cherry's. Now, I'm not going to go through all the stuff again because it was far too complicated, but really this is a last ditch to make sure that we don't leave the European Union without a deal. I can tell you it will be really a catastrophic thing for every single one of us if we do not have a deal to come out of the European Union. This is not what we want at all. Yes, now I've been handed a piece of paper here. I'm not quite sure what to make of it. It's another wonderful diagram, and I actually wish you could see it rather than me look at it. But it's listing here various different parts of, as I was going through all those different EAAs and EFTA things earlier on, and all these Baltic councils and various different parts that make up the whole European family. But you've got the European Council with Macedonia, Ukraine, Georgia, Serbia, Moldova, Russia's even involved in it, Azerbaijan, Montenegro, Armenia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Albania. That's all in the Council of Europe. And you've got the EFTA folks, which are the Swiss and the Norways and the Icelands and Liechtensteins. The European Zone, which is Bulgaria, Romania, Poland, Slovakia, Estonia, Lithuania, Malta, Latvia, Slovenia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Hungary, Belgium, Germany, Netherlands, Italy, Greece, Ireland, Portugal, Finland, Spain, Luxembourg, France, Austria, Sweden, Denmark, UK and Croatia at the moment. Agreement with the EU to mint euros. So these guys can actually mint. You know what mint is? Not something you put in your mouth, but the mint where they actually press out the coins. As a child, I was taken to the mint in London, and the man in the London Mint checked all our shoes as we went in to make sure there was no chewing gum on the bottom of them, so we couldn't pick up coins that might have dropped on the floor. And they were checked on the way in and on the way out to make sure we hadn't pinched any of the money from the Royal Mint. But Monaco and San Marino and the Vatican City, Andorra and Turkey, I think they can all mint their own euros, and probably all those other guys in the other bit there too. Andorra and Turkey, they have an EU customs union. So there's a lot of different options, and to my mind, a lot of this stuff hasn't been discussed any time in the last 2 years since the referendum. We're going to put the diagram for you on the screen now, apparently. I wonder if you'll make more sense of it than I. Well, maybe we get this on the screen. At the moment, you're just looking at my pretty face again. Here it is. Look. Now, can you see all that stuff? You see, the European Union and the European Zone is far, far more than I think many people would like to make out. And you see, it's not all about money. Within the treaty, within the treaties and all the different things of the European Union, within the agreement that Mrs May's come back from European Union, and she's been trying to get through the House of Commons, it shows you all about the rights of workers. It shows all about the self-employed people, the rights of those, and the recognition of professional qualifications. At the moment, because people here are in the European Union, they can work anywhere in the European Union. And all when I went to live in Switzerland, I was told that even cantons in Switzerland had different rules about if you wanted to be a teacher here in Canton Zurich, or if you wanted to go to Canton Uri, there would be different regulations and you had to have different qualifications. That's just in one small country. Now, the European Union has provided people with rights for their professional qualifications right across this huge great area of 513 million people. So self-employed rights, recognition of professional qualifications, social security rights right across the European Union, goods for market, and this is goods for goods that you not only sell, but goods that you might just like to make and give for free. It's all covered. Animal products, and also there are market surveillance so that people can check up and see what goods are being sold across Europe and they can maintain the quality. Medicines, customs, access to the networks of information systems and databases. That's not just the things to do with Europol and the police and checking that people who have got criminal records are around and about the place. This is to do with huge volumes of information. Then there's the VAT. In German, that's Mehrwertsteuer, which is adds more to the value of a product. Mehr worth. Intellectual property rights and trademarks, all the different criminal matters. And then there's a Euratom, which is to do with not just huge, great big power stations, which are nuclear powered, but isotopes and various different things that help with the radio things for cancer people. Then we've got the European Court of Justice, which oversees all the people who are involved in the European Union, something that safeguards the rights of you and me and all our friends and family. There are actually anti-fraud agreements across Europe, and there is agreement about how the damaged ozone layer is being put back together. And that's a very, very important thing that we're, as members of the European Union, involved in at this moment. The recovery of taxes across the European Union and property funds and assets to get those back from criminal activities. There's also a huge, great big lot of legislation involving the immunity of members of the European Parliament. Because obviously when people become a member of Parliament, they say things in Parliament and it can't be held against them once they've come out and not being a member of that anymore. There are agreements about pensions. If you have been working in one country in Europe for a part of your life, but then you go and live in another part, or you may go back to your home country, you want to be able to take whatever pension money you accrued in the one country with you. It's an important thing, and this is something that maybe not everybody's thought of. There's the European Investment Bank. Now, the UK have a deal of money in that investment bank, and that has to be reorganised. You've got the places which host the offices for the Galileo satellite systems, the security monitoring system of Galileo, the banking authority, the European Medicine Agency, and some of these things were stationed, they had offices in the United Kingdom. We've lost the Medicines Agency, and we've got professional secrecy, which is another thing. If you're a company and you make things, then you have to be allowed to keep secrets so that your competitors don't get those. And these are things that the European Union deal with. Another thing which is probably a mystery to many people, but I do have first-hand experience of these, and they were remarkable things. And I wish that many people had been able to be involved with them. But all European Union countries have a European Union school. Now, these are schools set up really principally for the members of the European Union's workers and officers, so that when, let's take Brussels, Brussels being one of the hearts of the European Union. All the people who go as civil servants there, they bring their children and their families with them, and they live there on a long-term basis. Now, what they have done is set up schools for the European community. And so these schools are huge, great big organisations, and they cover from the babies right up to the older children who are going on to university. And each of the nationalities bring their children there. And over the course of a year, for example, say you were in primary 6 or something as a child, you might go into that school and you'd learn many of your lessons in English, being a Scottish person. But for one of those lessons, maybe geography, you go and learn that in German. And a German child might learn his physics lesson in Italian. So all these children have the ability to take up a different language. And of course, they're all involved with children of different, and they all play in the playground together. And so you get an extraordinary mix in the teachers, where you get people from all over the world, well, all over the European Union, working together and organising the school together. And it was my wish when I saw these and was involved with them that it would be spread out across the whole of Europe. Because it would be magnificent. I mean, learning languages for children is so easy. In fact, if you can learn them when you're a tiny baby, you just listen and you learn. I have friends who've got children who can speak French, German, Italian, English, with no problem at all. They swap between them. Indeed, I do have children myself, and they're similar. They can do this with several different languages. So we move on then to fishing. Fishing is one of those touchstones in Scotland, of course, because fishing, and we've got the northeast, which is where my origins are from. Up in the northeast there, you've got Long Peterhead and Fraserburgh, of course, and Lossiemouth used to have a lot of fishing boats come out of there when I was a younger person. But then you go out to the western part of Scotland, and of course this is a different type of fishing. I'm telling you because I learnt this afternoon. Really, I didn't understand there was a difference, but in the northeast there, we're looking for whitefish, and that has been subject to a lot of controversy over the last few years, where you've seen terrible pictures of people catching lots of fish and then throwing them back into the water, most of them dead, so they go to waste. But that has been to do with improving the fishing stocks. But then on the western side of Scotland, we've got areas of there that have been for maybe shellfish of various different types, and the prawns and langoustine, and these products are taken from the nice Scottish waters there and then transported live in tanks across Europe. And of course the farmers of these, well, the fishermen there have been very concerned about the access to the European market. They're concerned about also conservation areas which have been extended, obviously for good reason, but of course it does impinge on what fishermen are able to do. And so they do have their concerns, and whether they will want a customs union or a no Brexit is yet to be established. Yeah, live prawns are a very, very difficult product. They're premium there, and they need to be handled carefully to get them across. Any delay. Just imagine you've brought in some catch to Ullapool. I don't know. I don't honestly know if Ullapool takes in a fishing catch there, but I do know Ullapool as being a beautiful little town there. And suppose you brought in some there, you've got to bring them across roads, down the road, and all the way down through England, across the Pennine Way, down the A1, and you're going to take them to Felixstowe or Harwich, or maybe even down to Dover. You've got to get them there at the right speed so that the condition of them brings a premium price for a premium product. If they arrive dead, no good at all. Absolutely no good at all. Yeah. You got all these different products. You see, you freeze them, it becomes one product. You pack them in ice, it's another product. You bring them live, fresh, it's totally another product. Yeah, fresh packed in ice. All these things are different. All right, so I'll continue down my list of all these different things, and I've only got halfway through this when I had to give up last night. But I've got a few more items I can make you aware of. There are obviously different liabilities. If as the UK wants to leave the European Union, it has liabilities and responsibilities that have been signed up to, and so these have to be addressed. You can't just walk out. You can't go out without paying your bar bill, as some people put it. But of course, this is a bill that's bigger, and it's very, very necessary. We cannot, you cannot imagine that the European Union are going to want to do anything with a country that walks away and doesn't pay its bill, and the reputation of us around the world would be damaged beyond repair if we do not pay up what we agreed to pay. And so that, you know, I mean, I've heard people in the House of Parliament say, well, we just walk out without a deal and we won't pay the 39 billion. No, because there will be nothing for us anywhere in the world. You cannot go into trade agreements unless you have a good track record with people. So we have to deal with the outstanding commitments. I have it in my ear that we may be going back to the Parliament at the moment, but we're just waiting to know. All right, it's not coming back just yet. So we've got to deal with the outstanding commitments. And of course, some of those commitments are to deal with properties and stuff. And of course, when we build something within the European Union, really, you know, part of it belongs to us in a sense. It belongs to the European Union, but we're a part of the European Union. And they've got buildings here in the United Kingdom and so forth and so on. And so this all has to be reconciled. And then there is a huge, great big thing. Well, I did mention this a bit before we started going off at a tangent there, but we have to get some capital back that was paid into the European Central Bank and the Investment Bank. Some of that has to be refunded to us, and that's a very complicated issue. Then there is coal and steel. Coal, of course, is one of those things that has diminished in the United Kingdom of late, after Mrs. Thatcher in the 1980s. And then I don't know if you know about the European Development Fund. That's a thing that we participate in. And then there's another one. And I'm not sure how many people in Scotland and the United Kingdom are aware of this, but one of the ways to stem the flow of migrants from Syria and various other countries in sub-Saharan Africa was to pay the Turkish people to keep them there. And we fund at the moment quite a lot of money to keep that program going. And you think of the implications if we pull out of that little project. And this would be the very heart of why many people wanted Brexit in the first place, which was to stop the free movement of people and the illegal movement of people. So we then move into defence and security. And I don't think anybody can be in any doubt that belonging to the European Union and to the Europol and to all the different databases, this has been a tremendous force for good in keeping all of us safer from terrorism, although sometimes the terrorists have broken through the cordon, of course. But defence and security are of paramount importance to every single one of us, because without safety, we really don't have a lot. Now, I've got a paper down here that I'll pick out just to break this up a wee bit. There's been stockpiling. I know, hands up out there who's been putting a few cans of beans in the back cupboard or underneath your bed. I don't know if you have. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there. In fact, a little while ago, the manufacturers of canned goods were reporting that their sales had improved. I'll just read this out. This is a press release from Reuters. It says, factories in Britain stockpiled for Brexit at an explosive rate last month, unlike anything seen before in a major rich economy, pushing manufacturing growth to an unexpected 13-month high, a survey showed on Monday. So when we get the next figures from the UK government telling us that the economy is booming, just remember, a lot of that was because of stockpiling. I'll go on. It says here, the IHS Market CIPS UK Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, PMI, rose to 55.1 to 52.1 in February, confounding all forecasts of Reuters poll that had pointed to it reading at 51.0. The headline figure exceeded readings from the Eurozone, where the global slowdown has left flat factories in a slump. So it looks like the panic about Brexit is actually causing certain manufacturers to have a little, a little bit of expanded profits. But British manufacturers are increasingly worried that their surge of activity, fueled by preparations for exit of the European Union, will make way for a sharp decline later. Survey compiler IHS Markit said, encouraging as today's figures may appear, the true picture of UK manufacturing continues to be obscured by stockpiling, driven by the ongoing Brexit uncertainty, and this pattern looks unlikely to change until manufacturers see a whiff of white smoke above Westminster. Helena Sands, head of marketing at Barclays Bank, said today. So this is a reference to how they choose the Pope, of course. You see a different colour smoke coming from the chimney when they're electing a new Pope. And they've used the same idea. Helena Sands said that. Lawmakers rejected Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit deal for a third time on Friday, leaving Brexit with Britain's withdrawal from the European Union in turmoil on the very day that it was supposed to leave the bloc. Politicians now have until April the 12th to come up with an alternative, blah, 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 and that's what they're doing at the moment. At the moment in the Parliament, they're counting the indicative votes, which was continue from last Wednesday. And it was interesting too how many people on the Conservative side of the Parliament today came in slamming this idea, not understanding what it was about, which was to try and draw a consensus from the members of Parliament, put forward several concrete, substantial ideas that could be put forward to the European Union as ways forward. And so they had 8 options on Wednesday last, and because of the amounts of votes each of those ideas got, it was possible for the Speaker and people in the House of Parliament today to put forward 4 different alternatives from the 8 which were put forward. They were slightly changed, slightly amended, but Kenneth Clarke put forward a simple customs union and said that would be a good way forward because it helps the Irish thing to be solved. We could trade freely around Europe. It wouldn't really affect the services being the larger part of the UK economy. And then Nick Bowles put forward his Common Market 2.0, which is a European Free Trade Association membership, really. And we would then take the free movement of people, which is something that some people don't want. But we wouldn't really have a big say at the table, as we do now as a member of the European Union. But we don't have to accept everything that they say, apparently. That's, it's not just to stick your hands up and take everything that everybody pushes at you. You can decide but I think the current EFTA countries do actually take on board the European Union ideas because they haven't found any they want to argue with just up to date. And that was something I read that Nick Bowles, I've actually clicked it away, I can't tell you what he said again. I'm sorry, it'd take too long to look for it. Then there was Peter Carl's confirmatory vote. He suggested this was a way to bring the country back together again, because we would put forward on the confirmatory vote and other people's vote 2 options, possibly to remain, possibly Mrs May's deal, or possibly something other that's been come out, maybe the Customs Union of Ken Clarke or Peter Bowles' thing, and we could confirm that by a public vote. People would be in the know now. People have had very much time to discuss all the different issues. People are much more aware. It's not just £350 million a week on the side of a bus. We can see how complex the whole thing is. Maybe people would elect to stay in. Maybe they would take the deal. But what Joanna Cherry's, the 4th one, ensures is that we cannot leave without a deal. And that no deal scenario is not what anybody wants at all. Well, having said that, 170 people in the Conservative Party, the ERG group, and some who support that, apparently that's what they do want. The consequences of this, nobody can be in any doubt, would be catastrophic. But of course, many of these people are rich enough to roll out the storm. And many of those have moved their businesses out of the UK to places in the European Union. Mr. Rees-Mogg moved his investment businesses there. You've seen other people in the news. Mr. Dyson moved his business out to Singapore. Indeed, we discussed the other day the oil people. I won't mention his name again because I know that doesn't ring with a lot of you. But he put £1 billion into renewing all the facilities up at Cruden Bay, up in the northeast of Scotland, and he's gone to live in Monaco. So we know where we stand. We're here together trying to make sure that the normal everyday person in Scotland, the normal every person who's got a family, who's got the love of their country, that they're not badly damaged by this thing. In the best case scenario, even with Mrs. May's own figures, a 6% downturn in the economy, should we leave with her deal, 10% or more, and the disruption at an immediate no deal would cause, because all the agreements stop with a no deal. So it's quite catastrophic. But Joanna Cherry's motion here is to protect us ultimately from a no deal Brexit. This is the one that saves everything. This is the one that I hope all the MPs will vote for, but the Labour Party have said they will not support it. And I found that quite extraordinary. In fact, the Labour Party, they said that they would support Nick Boles' motion. So Joanna Cherry's is all a last minute kind of thing. So if on the last day before, well, the second to last day before we've exited the European Union, if the government haven't managed to push Mrs. May's deal through, they're going to have to put this into action, and they're going to make sure, if the House of Commons will not approve Mrs. May's deal, and then they don't approve a no deal, then they've got to put this, they've got to ask the Minister of Her Majesty's government to cause an inquiry to see that if it was acceptable for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union without a deal. And if that doesn't happen, they cannot leave without a deal, is what this motion says. That's what it says. But it really brings us up to the line. It'll be April the 10th by the time that happens, but that's only, 9 days away. 9 days away. Other things that will affect you as a person are driving licenses around the continent. Of course, you can take your driving license. If you look at your driver's license at the moment, it says you can drive anywhere across Europe with it. And the insurance for driving across Europe, that'll be affected. The green card business for your insurance, you'll have to buy one of those each time you want to go travelling. Yeah, you have to name all the countries. Maybe they'll go back to a bail bond, which they used to have in Spain all those years ago. I think I called it an abonnement last time I was speaking about it. The names bail bond didn't come to mind, but it was something like £20,000 in the old days. I think you had to get that from your insurance company just in case you were in an accident in Spain. All these things have gone. Pensions abroad. Travelling for your health business abroad is going to be affected, because at the moment you have, if you go to any country in European Union, you take your card with you, which you get free of charge. You get the basic health deal that you get in that country, and it's all they reconcile it with the National Health Service back here in Scotland, and so you know that you've got a safety net. You can take your own private insurance, of course, but you've got that safety net which assures that you're okay. Yeah, there's another little one. Something's just been put in my ear, and something that maybe, I don't know if it affects too many Scots people, but of course Saturday night in Glasgow used to be a great place to have a booze up, but there were these booze cruises as they were, and they used to go for a day trip. In fact, you went on the ferry for a day trip. You could actually stay on the ferry if you want to, and you could pick up all your duty frees on the thing. But duty won't be free anymore because, yeah. And then there were these supermarkets in Cali, and people used to go and fill up their boot with all this stuff and vans and everything, because you could do, because it was no duty on any of these things. You know, you were only allowed to bring a couple of bottles of, I think it was 2 bottles of wine, a bottle of fortified wine. That was something. You could bring maybe a bottle of spirits, and I don't smoke, never have smoked, but 200 cigarettes it was maybe. But we're going to go back to those kinds of things, and there will be duties, what you can bring back, what you can't bring back. So all these things are going to be affected, and you'll also notice that there was a thing where the city of culture, it did upset quite a few people. I think I might be right in saying that Dundee had put forward to be a city of culture, and that was stopped because the people who organised that within the European Union said, well, if you're not going to be in the European Union, you can't be a city of culture. And this city of culture thing's been a magnificent thing for many cities. I know that Liverpool down in England had it for a while ago, and I think, did Glasgow have it? The Glasgow was, I think, was the first one to have it, and it had a major impact. Just as these things like the Commonwealth Games and the Olympic Games, they bring people, they bring investment. They, you know, I mean, when you build one of these Olympic stadiums, it's a huge, great big investment. And of course, some people could say, well, you could spend the money on other things. But what it does is concentrate people's attention. It brings in, you know, there's a worker and he goes and buys a bun in the cafe down the road, and it makes the money go round. And that's also another thing. Let's go to Germany again. There was a king. 1886 he died. He was called Ludwig II of Bavaria. I don't know if that means anything to you, but actually he was one of the people who really kind of started off the common market back in those days. There was a man called Bismarck, and he was trying to join the parts of Germany about. Now I'm going into a bit of history for you, but there's a reason, and the reason is this: because Ludwig built beautiful castles. There was one at Lindenhof. He was born in a place called Herrenchiemsee, which is on a lake not so far from Bavaria, near Munich. But there was another beautiful one. And this one you'll know. You'll know all about it. And this one makes money for the German economy, hand over fist, year after year, year after year after year after year. And he nearly bankrupted Germany by building it. And it was a kind of a trade-off. They want the people in the government wanted a war, and Ludwig wanted to build his castles. And he built a beautiful place called Neuschwanstein. And it's a lovely thing right up in the Bavarian Alps. And it's the one that you see every time you watch a Disney movie. Because when Walt Disney went there, he was enchanted by this magnificent castle up on the hill. And you have seen it many, many times, or a version of it. If you've been to Disneyland or Disney World, you've seen a copy of it, or a kind of a copy of it. But you see, so in taking all that money and causing quite a lot of upset back in those days, he did actually make something that endured, and maybe that Olympic Stadium down in London that they built quite a few years ago now will be an enduring thing. It certainly had a way of regenerating that part of London. And so you see, it's not just giving money to this and giving money to that. It's how can you make the money work. It's an important part of all this stuff. I wonder how we're getting on in Parliament. Have they counted the votes yet, or are they? Apparently they're still chatting away. And I'll ask the control room another question. Did we find out anything about what happened in the debate in the Westminster Hall debate on the revoking of Article 50? They may be finding a bit of paper for me to tell you about that. I've got to tell you the total of this show is off the cuff. There's no plan, there's no script. We didn't honestly have any idea what we'd be doing for you. And I'm sitting here alone. If this was David Dimbleby, he'd have a bunch of other folk there to pass and stop you being bored. But I hope you enjoyed the little bit about up in Neuschwanstein there. I was trying actually to find the withdrawal agreement again, but it's difficult to talk to you and find it at the same time. I think when I left off last night, because I had to go to bed, it was about halfway through it. So I was trying to sort of find something relevant I could speak to you about here. But what I've got is what I found in the middle of this is the United Kingdom have to pay the liabilities in the various different things. So if maybe I skip on from that a wee bit here, I might find something that you might find interesting. I mean, there's just absolutely so much material. And honestly, this afternoon, sitting here, listening to the people in Parliament and reading all this stuff, the amount I've learnt today, I don't know how we can ever contemplate leaving this thing. It's so complicated. And if you think back, Vince Cable said that. He said probably they'll find it so complicated they'll actually give up on the idea, which... I'm being told that being complicated is not a good reason, but being bad is a good reason. And it is a bad idea to leave the European Union on many of the different levels I've been just talking about already this evening. So the MPs are mulling around in the Parliament. Their votes are being cast. They've written their votes on slips of paper. But they can vote for everything, so I don't know how many people voted today. But if you... Right, so apparently they won't get these results till 10:30. Now, I don't know if you want to watch me until 10:30. Maybe you do. Maybe I've got a fan club out there, I doubt it. But maybe you prefer if Gordon Ross was here. I don't know, maybe you would. But from here until 10:30, it's an hour and 15 minutes. So we're going to have to find some stuff to pack this programme out with, a little bit more than what we've got here, I think. So let me have a wee looky here. I know that my director-producer would like to stick solely to the European Union, but she's going to be finding some stuff for us. We're going to find a little bit, see if we can find a few reactions here. Let's see what's gone up here. Now, I'll tell you one little thing today. I was caught out, actually, today, because, of course, it is April the 1st. I wasn't caught out because when I was a child, April the 1st went on until 12 o'clock midday. And today, someone wrote to me and gave me an April Fool. And I wasn't sure if it was. And I looked at my watch and I thought, well, it can't be. But they did say that Mr. Mundell had resigned. But, of course, it did turn out to be an April Fool. Yes. So I'm just looking at Michael Russell's, see if he said anything today. I can't see anything there. Yeah, okie dokie. Brexit, according to RTE, which is on Michael Russell's Twitter feed at the moment, and Mike Russell is our man responsible for Brexit, constitutional affairs. Brexit has cost the British economy £600 million a week since the referendum. And the shock of a no-deal divorce will hammer the country even harder, according to a new report by investment banking giant Goldman Sachs. That's a thing, isn't it? Because have you noticed how the money tree keeps jangling because Mrs May and her government keep offering and promising things for the future? One wonders where all that money will come from. After all, we've printed quite a lot in the past while. Let's see what else we can find down here. Let's keep off that one. I found something from someone I don't know, but he's on Michael Russell's. Michael Russell's retweeted it, so I suppose Michael must think he's okay. It's Fabian Zulech, and he says, in Scotland, striking how everyone talks about Brexit in the streets, restaurants, buses, etc. No common conclusion, although large majority against, but a real loss of trust in Westminster politics and the capacity of politicians to deliver what people want will have a long-term impact. I was out and about on Saturday talking to people about Brexit and the impending Scottish independence referendum or whatever they decide to do. And I can tell you that the word on the street was absolutely categorically, we think that the UK government has made a mess of Brexit and they were not happy. And I spoke to a lot of people on Saturday. This was just on the street in an ordinary Scottish town. I stopped people and just asked them their opinions. I would tell you that 95% of the people I spoke to were very, very unhappy with the way that Brexit has been handled, and they were most disgruntled. Now, of course, that was only me asking people in the street. I don't know if the pollsters would have had a similar result, but I got a feeling that maybe that would be the case, because I don't, I think, it's an interesting thing, if you get a group of maybe a dozen people and you ask them to watch a car go by, and that car goes by, and you say, well, what do you think the speed of that car was as it passed you? You will find that the average of what they think is probably exactly what the car's speed was. So polls do actually have credibility, and maybe the bigger they are, the better. And of course, you can bias a poll by asking only one group of people who went to Oxford University or who went to Banff Academy or whatever it happens to be. You can bias it in that way, but here's another one. It is. We got some nice little video clips to play for you. And they're from the SNP conference last year. And Michael's coming up, Michael Russell, and we've just been reading out some of his Twitter feed here, and let's take a look and see what we've got. This is from the SNP conference last September. Their conference is coming up again in April. This April, so about a couple of weeks from now. But this is from last September. I think.
We're joined here with Mike Russell. Mike, how have you found conference?
Oh, I'm always invigorated by conference. The bigger it gets, the better it gets, and this is just enormous. Standing on the stage in there, you can almost see the curvature of the earth. It's quite remarkable, and there's a real energy to it, and I love the word hope, because that's what politics is about.
Is there anything particular highlights that you've really cottoned on to so far?
I think there's just been a good standard of discussion and debate, and a breadth of discussion and debate. This isn't just about one subject or two subjects. It's about all the concerns, the day job that the Parliament is doing, that the party is doing. I was in a debate this afternoon about mental health. It was profound. It was very focused. There was people telling their stories. And equally, Brexit is a huge issue at this event, because it has to be where we're going. And independence, of course, is where we are going. So all those things are important, and then we'll wind up with the First Minister's speech, which will send us all the way with a spring in our step.
What's your comments on the Independence March at the weekend?
Well, I think it was very impressive. I mean, I wasn't able to go. I'm in Argyll, and Saturdays in Argyll, as you know, as an ex-MP, Saturdays in constituency are precious and there's things to be done. But I hope to go on one of the ones in the future. And it's that optimism. People feel optimistic. And speaking as a photographer, pictures were great.
Yeah, the pictures were fantastic. So going forward, obviously, Brexit's huge, but what's the other issues that are important for you?
Well, I think we have to get Brexit resolved, and we have to resolve it in a way that respects the wishes of the Scottish people, and also what we need to get out of it, which is not the type of Brexit, any type of Brexit that the UK government is suggesting. But it is about Scottish democracy. It's about Scotland being a country that has the right to choose its future and is not going to be told what to do. And for me, after many, many years in this party, that's a really touchstone issue. We have the right to be heard, and we shouldn't be silenced.
Well, it looks like you've got your work cut out ahead of you, Mike. Thanks very much for joining us today.
So there was Corrie Wilson talking to Mike Russell at last year's party conference for the SNP, and we've got now Ruth Maguire.
We're joined by Ruth Maguire, who's the MSP for Cunningham South. Hi Ruth, how have you found the conference?
I'm loving conference so far. It's always a joy to be here, but this one's particularly good. I think there's a bit of a buzz about the place. I think everyone's hopeful for the future. We're living in interesting times, but there's lots for us to do.
Did you go to the march at the weekend, or did you see any of the commentary? Or?
No, I did a slightly lazy option for the march because I was moving out of my Edinburgh flat, which just happens to be on Canongate. So I spent quite a bit of the day hanging out the window and waving at folk rather than marching or indeed cleaning the flat. So, yeah.
But you were soaking up the atmosphere.
I was absolutely soaking up the atmosphere, and actually we were talking about it with my husband afterwards. We normally go on these marches, and we've been on many over the years. It was really interesting to watch it, to be above it, and to see the scale of it and the colour and the atmosphere. It was fantastic. It really was.
And of course you'll be going back to Parliament soon. What's the important issues that are coming up for you?
So I've recently been appointed convener of the Equalities and Human Rights Committee. So we've got a lot of work coming our way. We're going to be publishing a report on human rights and how we incorporate that into the Parliament and raise the profile of human rights, that human rights are for everyone. We also will be looking at legislation around equal protection for children. So it's going to be a busy time. I think those kind of equalities and human rights issues are probably going to be the main focus for me.
And what's your thoughts on Brexit?
I think it's an absolute burach. I completely understand why people in our communities are worried about it. I think it's not a good situation to be in, and I think, as Mike Russell said in his speech this afternoon, enough is enough.
Well, thanks very much for joining us, Ruth, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
So there's Corrie again, and I think we've got one more video for you, and it'd be Keith Brown, the Deputy Leader of the SNP.
We're joined here by Keith Brown, the Deputy Leader of the SNP. Hi Keith, how have you found the conference?
It's been the usual buzz of conference, but you can tell there's something else happening, there's something stirring, and of course to have that huge march in Edinburgh just beforehand has really got the delegates buzzing, so a great time and a time to see old friends and make new plans for campaigning ahead.
And obviously your role as Deputy Leader, there's lots happening. Can you tell us a bit about what's in the agenda coming up?
Well, I've just announced on the stage that there's to be another day of action on the 17th of November, and of course we have to lay the plans for that, and we'll do that through the campaign team. But in addition to that, talking to members of the wider Yes family, so tomorrow night after conference I'll go straight to Stirling for a Yes meeting there, and just making sure that we get on that campaign footing that's so important to take our country forward.
In terms of some of the speeches that have been here at conference, has there been anything that's been highlighted for you?
Yeah, I thought the Adam Price speech, the fraternal address from Plaid Cymru, was a superb speech, drawing together the interests of Wales and Scotland, talking about the ways that we have worked together in the past and we can work together in future. And I think it's really important for delegates to hear that from other parts of the UK and other parts of the world, that the struggle which we have to try and make sure our country is independent is one that's shared by other countries. It's a noble struggle, and to hear how people in Wales are getting on has been extremely important.
I think there was something in the news that said that really they're looking to emulate the success of the SNP in government.
Well, Adam Price said that. He said, given the scale of what the SNP has become, 125,000 members, second biggest party in the UK, and also having had the referendum and got to 45% of the votes, I think a lot of people in Wales say that is a pretty good aspiration for them to go forward to achieve independence for themselves. So this is what others are saying about us, but it's always gratifying to hear that, and it helps people know that we're on the right track.
And finally, is there anything you'd like to say to the wider membership and the wider Yes movement about what they need to do in the next few weeks, months to get organised, get involved?
Yeah, first of all, be good to each other, respect each other's point of view. When we're talking to people about independence, respect their point of view, whatever it is as well. We shouldn't be like the Unionists are and some of the things that they've been saying. We should be better than that, and demonstrate by the way that we campaign for independence the kind of Scotland that we want to see. And talk to people, that's the way to do this, convince people. Talk to them about things that actually matter in their lives and point out why independence would make it better. That's the most important thing to do. And if we all do that, then we'll get right across that line as we campaign towards the next referendum.
It sounds like there's a lot of work ahead.
There always is.
Yes. Thanks very much, Keith, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Yes, Keith Brown, Deputy Leader of the SNP. I've got a little quote from Keith from this afternoon, and Joanna Cherry said about the Labour Party not going to support her motion, which we've read out before. This is the real backstop, the thing that will stop us from just falling out of the European Union without a deal. Joanna said, so the front bench will whip support for all motions tonight, except me. And she's talking about the Labour front bench will whip support for all motions tonight. So the three of them, the Labour Party are forcing their members to vote for. I intervened on Keir Starmer to ask what Labour voters will think if they allow this insurance policy against no deal to fail. And he had no answer. And Keith responded to that. Keith Brown, the Deputy Leader of the SNP, he said, so Labour front bench refuses to support reasonable, balanced and measured compromise amendment from Joanna Cherry because it is too early to worry about a no deal. Really? Yeah, I mean, too early. This is 9 days to go before absolute and utter mayhem could befall the whole of the United Kingdom and us here in Scotland. So Derek Mackay, who's obviously the Finance Minister, he said this, tonight SNP MPs will be standing up for Scotland's place in Europe. Our immediate priority is to back proposals to stop Brexit in line with the views of the people of Scotland. Yeah, well, we'll have a few more of those in a minute, but obviously Corrie mentioned the marches. She was talking about the Edinburgh March last October. There are marches going on around Scotland the whole of the summer, and they'll be in Ayr and Wigton and Oban and various other places, of course, Edinburgh and Glasgow and Galashiels, and the SNP conference comes up at the end of the month. They will be debating amongst many other things, no doubt. I've lost the name of it. The Growth Commission, I do beg your pardon. You sit here, all this stuff coming out of your head, trying to think what you're going to say next, and I couldn't remember the Growth Commission. Now, this Growth Commission thing is something that's caused some controversy. It's a thing that several newspapers have used to bash the SNP over the head with because they've pulled bits out of it and highlighted things and tries to cause divisions. This was a document that was put together to show people what the options are. It's a document to show a possible way forward. It doesn't say that we have to do it. It doesn't say that we're going to do it. But it's a bunch of ideas to see what futures Scotland could attach itself to. It doesn't bind anybody to anything. It's just and no future independent Scottish government can be bound by it. Now, a thing that I've noticed too is that some people, of course, are Conservatives. Some people are voting for Liberal Democrats. Some people are voting for Greens. Some people here in Scotland vote for the SNP. There are socialist workers. There are independent people. There are many, many different views. And of course, Scotland is, as it is now, today, attached to the United Kingdom. If in the future Scotland became an independent country, of course the politics and the landscape would change enormously, because it would be a different set of circumstances. And so in an independent Scotland, a Growth Commission report would be a different thing, because it's made from now when the circumstances are this, and they might try to have a vision of what the future is, but it's not really possible to be fully aware of what all the circumstances will be. Sorry, I thought someone was saying something to me. But no, they're not saying anything to me at all. It's just you and me out in television land. I mean, you could obviously argue with me if you want to that, well, of course, we don't know what it will be post-Brexit. So why don't we just get out? And I did meet a person on the weekend when I told you a few moments ago, I was in the street asking people what they thought. And one person said, we should just get out of that blah, 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 blah. He was very cross with it all. He said, those people that still want to sell us their cars and make no difference, blah, blah, blah. But it does make a difference, because you can't just sell cars to people. Do you know how many centimetres a car headlight has to be off the ground? Do you know how high the car must ride so it doesn't hit the curb? Do you know how much force a car must take if it's in a collision before the bumper breaks away and the airbags? All these things have to be agreed. You can't just sell a car in one marketplace. Not these days. It costs too much to make them. So all those things have to be agreed, and they have to. You can't just do these things on your own. And where UK is going to be, Mr. Liam Fox has managed to roll over 8 trade deals. At the moment, we have free trade with every single country in the European Union, 27 countries, plus a lot of others that are on the periphery. I've been through a list earlier in this show about all the different people who are involved in the European Union, not just the members, but the Turkeys and the people who are in customs unions and all the different free trade agreements. The European Union have agreed a free trade agreement with Japan, with Canada, and with various other people, and this will continue. And we, mighty United Kingdom, with its 66 million people, are going to be now a force to reckon with 513 million people in the European Union, plus all the other guys they deal with. And then people keep telling me that the World Trade Organization is going to be what we do. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization is an intergovernmental organization that is concerned with the regulation of international trade between nations. It officially commenced on the 1st of January 1995 under the Marrakesh Agreement. It has been signed by 124 nations and it replaces the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, the GATT agreements, which was commenced in 1948. It's the largest international economic organization in the world. The World Trade Organization deals with regulation of trade in goods, services and intellectual property between participating countries, providing a framework for negotiating trade agreements and the dispute resolutions process aimed at enforcing participants' adherence to the World Trade Organization agreements, which is signed by representative members of member governments. now you might say to yourself, well, that's something like the European Union, but actually the European Union is far more, because it deals with not only economics, but the well-being, the hole in the ozone layer, the cultural, cities of culture, and the schools, and many other things. So we've got a little bit more coming our way. Let me get that. All right, yes. Well, this is a story right hot off the press, because this happened in our offices today, in our studios. There was a member of an engineer from Hoover, Candy. I don't know if I should advertise them. Other makes are available. Actually, we're not the BBC, so we can say what we like, actually. But the Hoover engineer was here today, and he told one of our people who work here in the office that they get parts from Italy. And there was a strike at Calais last week. The strike was in Calais. They get parts from Italy, and it delayed them getting parts to mend various Hoover appliances here in Scotland by 3 days. Now, I don't know how many exactly lorries, trucks. A woman in the Parliament today said it was 1,170 trucks went through Dover in a day. I don't think that's correct. I'm sure it's far, far more. But if each of those has got to be stopped and checked, and people have got to see if there's something wrong with them, then 3 days is not in it. There was a program that I saw years ago. It was called The Duty Men. And they stopped, it was all about the customs people in Dover and various other places around the UK. And they stopped a lorry full of melons. And the melons were just piled on top of one another. They weren't in boxes or anything like that. And the customs men made the people empty the melons from the truck. They found no contraband, no drugs, nothing. But that took a long time. A long time. And you imagine what it's going to be like if there's no agreement and trucks have to stop. In fact, we did discuss that a little bit in a show a few days ago where we talked about the tariffs of goods coming in and out. And one of the things was that the government would lower the tariffs to zero on much of the goods that came in through the ports. And I rather cynically suggested that might be one of the reasons for it, because obviously if you've got to check everything for customs and tariffs, then it's going to take a long time to deal with that. Now, we've known for many years that the free trade of goods around the world increases the wealth of people around the world exponentially, and people get richer in every part of the world because people are able to trade and move things about. And that's, of course, the central core of the European Union, because we can move freely the goods and the services and the people and the investment around and about. Without that ability, this slowing down will inevitably slow down the economy of the United Kingdom. The European Union does that on one level, and the World Trade Organization does it on another level. And you must understand that the European Union belongs to the World Trade Organization. But its agreements and its things, I think, are a real mystery. I certainly cannot tell you them all myself, and I haven't heard any of our politicians starting to go into the nitty-gritty of what the World Trade Organization does. But it does try to free up trade around the world. As I said to you earlier on, if you were listening, Kenneth Clarke made his speech about his motion, which is in the frame for voting at the moment. He said that it's not so much the tariffs and the customs duties that slow down trade. It is the regulations of how this product performs in one market and another, and what people... there's a stark reminder. There was a lady, she took to Egypt some tablets. They were to cure the pains of her partner, and she didn't know that they were illegal in Egypt. The consequences of her were absolutely stark. She was sent to prison. She thought that this tramadol, I think it was, which is perfectly legal here in the UK, would be fine to take to Egypt. No, it's not. And that kind of thing will happen time and time and time again on dozens and hundreds of different things. You can imagine courts being tied up in red tape from here to the next century with all the different things that will happen. Yeah, I thought something came in my ear then, but it was not. But if you think that World Trade Organization is going to get us out of this, I don't think you're going to be on a hiding to much, because the basic principles of this trading system are non-discrimination. You can have a most favored nation rule, but and the nation treatment policy, but these are two parts of the World Trade Organization. But you have to treat people equally. Now that's quite a difficult thing, because some nations, like the UK, or not a nation, the UK, the group of nations which is called the UK, we have very advanced mechanisms for making things, advanced companies, and they can produce goods to a very, very high standard. There is an organization called the ISO, the International Standards Organization, which tries to ensure that standards are common around the world, but you cannot think that a country that lives in a less developed part of the world can produce in quite the same way. Indeed, I pointed out the other day when Day Tucker was here that France outputs more goods in a year than the whole of Africa does in a year. And you think of all the different countries that are there. Now, you have to have reciprocity. So, you know, if you treat one person, one organization, in one group of people, one nation, one marketplace is the word I'm looking for, the World Trade Organization, you have to treat everybody the same. So, all the tariffs have to be equal. And that possibly doesn't, tariffs are often used to protect a market. Within potteries, they're often talked about when they're talking about the European Union at the moment. The potteries, because obviously people can import stuff from China. Another thing that Kenneth Clark said about a trade deal with China, well, you think it's going to be easy? It isn't. Absolutely not. And if you remember a few days ago, Mr. Gavin Williamson, the Secretary of State for Defence, said he was going to send the big new aircraft carrier down to the South China Seas, rattling his sabres, and that actually made the Chinese leave the negotiations for a deal with them. So one part of the government not knowing what the other part of the government's doing. With the World Trade Organization, you have to be absolutely transparent about what you're doing. I don't know if some of those people would think that was a good idea. Safety values, that's another thing that causes a slowdown on the trade of goods, because we have people, Trading Standards Organisation in the UK, that goes around trying to make sure that the things that you buy in the shops are of merchantable quality, but not only that, safety quality. You don't want to buy a telephone charger that's going to catch fire when you plug it in the wall. But these things do happen, and these people work extraordinarily hard in order to stop. And all this stuff that we're going to give up by leaving the European Union, it's extraordinary. From my own experience too of travelling all over Europe for many, many years, the joy of going through different countries and being able to buy this in this place and that in that place, which is what happens, because people have their specialities, they have their different ways of doing things, and just to enjoy the different smells and the cultures and the way it feels. And it is absolutely remarkable. And you see, the European Union doesn't try to standardise anybody's culture. It's actually a way of protecting the culture. We know that we have to have trade between us all. And we know that a lot of people are against this globalization. And in fact, what the European Union does is to protect countries and help a huge, great, big economy like the United Kingdoms or Germany to deal with a small economy like Greece or Malta. And it gives them the opportunity to have a kind of a level playing field and a way of being a part of this great, big thing, which is the world. I mean, if you're going to start looking at the world, look at the Chinese. They've got 1 billion people. The Indians have got 1 billion people. And the Indians have got to the stage in their development where they can put a satellite in the air and up in space and actually manage to shoot it down, which is what they did last week. It was reported, and so where are we going to be with 1 million Indians who've got such technology, and 1 billion Chinese that obviously make just about anything? And I saw a report where a Chinese businessman said we could make everything. Here in China, everything that the world needs, we can make the whole lot without anybody else lifting a finger. And then we look to the West and we see Donald Trump's America. We already trade more with America than with any other place. And at the moment, we sell them more than they buy from us. I think that is quite an interesting thing. So if we make a trade deal with Mr. Trump and the Americans, how's that going to go? Forward or backwards? But I can bet you can bet your bottom dollar that the lower standards of food hygiene, of the quality of food, will be put into question, because this is the only thing that can happen. It cannot go in our favour. We've got a good trading relationship with America already, and so I wonder if I ask how are they doing in the It's taking a long time to count all of these votes, and quite obviously it would, because they have to be each of the MPs, and there were a lot in the chamber today, and I'm sure that a lot voted even if they weren't in the chamber, because there was the Westminster Hall debate too, where some of the people were. So if a lot of people have been voting, 600 and odd members, you've got to count all those votes, and they could vote for all four. So, 600 times 4, and they've got a choice of one or the other. Yeah, so I'm looking through here. I'm just wondering what else we can find you from here. So I'll read you what Nicola Sturgeon said. Genuinely can't think of any good reason why Labour MPs would not vote for Joanna Cherry's option tonight. It provides an insurance policy against a no-deal Brexit and doesn't mean that Article 50 couldn't be triggered again in the future if the UK manages to work out what it wants. And also there's another point there to make, that if the UK revokes Article 50, at another later date they can decide to instigate it again. You're not trapped in at all in any way, shape or form. It's not what happens. Let's put that in here and see what we got. All right. The EU lists 50 countries with which it currently has a trade agreement of one kind or another. the most comprehensive list of EU free trade agreements seems to be in the European Commission memo of 2013. Well, that must be a bit out of date, I think. Yeah. Now let's. This is. So we've got Mr. Fox. There's a couple more to be added onto this list, I think. But let's see. He's managed to make 8 out of 40 so far. I mean, when we started this Brexit thing, Mr. Fox said it'll be easy to just take the agreements that the EU have got, the 40 different trade agreements they've got, and just turn them over and just realign them to just be between us and them, the UK and them. So on the 30th of January this year, 2019, Chile agreed to roll over the agreement. 31st of January, Eastern and Southern Africa. The 1st of February, the Faroe Islands. The 11th of February, Switzerland. The 18th of February was the Palestinian Authority. The 18th of February also is Israel. There we are, two sides of the coin on the same day. And the Pacific Islands on the 14th of March. And on the 22nd of March, a few days ago, the Caribbean countries. Let's go down to the bottom of this list here. So here we are, the UK's top 10 trading partners in 2017. 2017. Switzerland was number 10, and we exported to Switzerland more than we imported from them. So we exported 19 billion pounds worth of stuff, and they introduced back to us 11.7 lots of stuff. So I don't know, what do they sell to us? Swiss pen knives and stuff. Well, they make a lot of other things too, lots of services and insurance things, Zurich Insurance, etc. So with the Italians, now the Italians, they give us more than we get from them. So they send us 24 billion pounds worth of stuff in a year. We send to them 18.9 billion pounds of stuff. So I suppose they send us their spaghetti and all that kind of thing, and washing machines. And the next one down is Belgium. And Belgium, we have a trade, well, they deficit with Belgium. They send us 28 billion pounds worth of stuff, and we export to them 18.7 billion pounds. Spain is the next one, and of course, you know, the point that Nicola Sturgeon makes, we need England and Wales and Ireland to have good, thriving economies. It's no good having a neighbour who constantly needs a cup of sugar. And so we want all these people to be doing well, and we want Spain to be doing well. Well, Spain do well by us. They export to us 31.3 billion pounds worth of stuff, and we export to them 16.1. Ireland's the next one, and we do better because we send to Ireland 34 billion pounds worth of goods, dairy goods and butter and heaven knows what else. But, you know, this is the important one, isn't it? Because of the backstop in Northern Ireland. You don't want a border between us. You don't want us to be a different trading relationship. Ireland give us 21.8. And then we move to China. And we take from China 45.2 billion pounds worth of stuff. And we export to China 22.3. So what's that? Motor cars, Jaguars and that kind of thing that we make here in with the French, we have almost an equal thing. We give them 40.8 billion, and they send us back 40.4 billion. And probably wine, who knows. And then it's the Netherlands, Holland. The Netherlands is 46.9, and they take from us, and we take back 39. Germany, we give the German people 78.1 billion pounds worth of they take from us, imports from us, and we take back 56.8. And by far and away the largest of our export markets, by far and away the largest, is America, the US, the United States of America. We give them 112.2 billion pounds worth of goods each year, and they send back 70.4. So when Mr. Trump wants to do a trade deal with us, what do you think he's wanted to do? He want to level up the playing field. I mean, you know, so it's to do with America first. So going back to the other list of people we've actually managed to sign up deals with, rollover deals. And these deals aren't just reciprocal. There are various problems and stuff with them. So it's just, you know, it's just a vague deal. We've got Chile. They've signed up here at the end of January. And the things that we, you know, the big things are fruit, nuts, drinks, the top goods imported by the UK. And the government says that the deal with them is to protect parts of the UK's wine industry. Chile obviously do a lot of wine. Then we've got Eastern and Southern Africa. The trade between Eastern and Southern Africa, which is the ESA region, was worth 1.5 billion in 2017, about 0.10 of the total UK trade. The UK ESA deal covers Madagascar, Mauritius, Seychelles and Zimbabwe. Then we got the Faroe Islands. Now this is the 114th largest trading partner of the United Kingdom, and the total trade between the two countries was worth 236 million in 2017, and fish and crustaceans made up the vast majority of the UK's imports from the Faroes in 2017, worth 201.7 million, while the total exports to the Faroes was 6 million, mostly machinery, mechanical appliances. The UK government says that the agreement reached will mean that customers continue to benefit from a wide choice of lower fish prices, such as Atlantic salmon, haddock and halibut. Then Switzerland. Switzerland, under the UK-Switzerland agreement, and the Swiss and the UK have had agreements well before the European Union, of course. And of course Switzerland are just that one step out of the European Union. And this agreement was confirmed in Bern, the political capital of Switzerland, on the 11th of February. Tariffs will continue to be avoided on the vast majority of goods traded between the two countries. Without the deal, the government says the motor industry could have faced up to £8 million tariff charges. I suppose that must be for parts for cars, because to my knowledge the Swiss don't make motor cars, whereas we do. But the tariffs of course would have been back in their direction, while aluminium exporters could have faced up to £4 million worth of charges on tariffs. The Department of International Trade says that the trade between the UK and Switzerland was worth 32.1 billion in 2017, accounting for 2.5% of the total UK trade. So that's very significant, that particular deal. And also the deal means that the arrangements of people travelling to and from Switzerland are not going to be too harshly affected as in they might be in other places. The Palestinian Authority, UK Palestinian Authority agreement was signed by Liam Fox on the 18th of February, this the total trade between the two has been 25 million in 2017, and the UK government says that it will benefit from Palestinian exports of fruit, nuts and olive oil. So what with the Caribbean deal and the Palestinian deal, we're certainly not going to go short of nuts anytime soon. The deal with Israel was formally signed on the 18th of February, allows businesses to continue to trade as they do now after the 29th of March. Of course, that date was changed, without any additional tariffs and barriers. The government says that the agreement could save the UK youth vehicle industry up to £9 million a year in tariff charges. According to the Office for National Statistics, the total trade between the UK and Israel was worth $3.9 billion in 2017. And then we get to the Pacific Islands. Yes, a little jaunt down a nice Pacific Island beach might be quite nice just at the moment. Give us a relief from all this stuff here in the cold weather of Scotland. The deal with the Pacific Islands covers Fiji and Papua New Guinea and was signed on the 14th of March. The UK says the deal will gradually remove 80% of tariffs on UK exports to these countries and maintain access to goods such as fish and sugar. The 2017 trade between UK and the region was worth about £369 million. The government says that other countries in the region will be allowed to request to join the UK Pacific Agreement in the future. So, Caribbean countries then. So, the Caribbean states known as CARIFORM covers 9 countries, including Barbados, Jamaica, and they signed on the 22nd of March. The further 5 countries include the Bahamas, Trinidad, Tobago, and have agreed to the deal in principle and are expected to sign shortly. According to the Department of Trade, the deal eliminates all taxes on goods from the signing countries and allows businesses to trade as they currently do. Exports of rum, bananas, sugarcane are all expected to benefit from the arrangement. Total trade, imports and exports between the UK and the region was worth about $2.5 billion. So that's a fair sum. Now, just to stop me gabbling on a little bit, there might be something for you else to watch. We're going to advertise our own channel now. We're going to advertise some of the things that we do here on Broadcasting Scotland. And, we need to promote ourselves a wee bit here because we need to have more sponsors. I mean, you get me sitting here and you get Gordon Ross and Corrie comes along and Ellen's here quite a bit and some others, and we get guests in. But we'd like to do your other programmes. We'd like to make Broadcasting Scotland the go-to station for Scotland. What we need for that is people to sign up and make sponsorships. We'd like you to give £5 a month if you would. On our website there's a volunteer page for people who'd like to volunteer for us, and there's also some for you to give your sponsorships. Here's some advertising. Oh, hang on, we're going back to Parliament.
Order. I can now announce the outcome of the divisions on motions relating to the United Kingdom's withdrawal from and future relationship with the European Union. In respect of Mr. Clark's motion C, Customs Union, the ayes were 273. The noes were 276. So the noes have it. In respect of Mr. Nicholas Bowles' motion D, Common Market 2.0, the ayes were 261. The noes were 282. So the noes have it. In respect of Mr. Peter Kyle's motion E, Confirmatory Public Vote, the ayes were 280, the noes were 292. So the noes have it. In respect of Joanna Cherry's motion G, parliamentary supremacy. The ayes were 191, the noes were 292. So the noes have it. The list showing how honourable members voted will be published in the usual way on the Commons Vote app and website and in Hansard. Points of order. Yes, the Secretary of State. Point of order, Secretary of State, Mr. Stephen Barclay.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker. This is now the second time the House has considered a wide variety of options for a way forward. It has once again failed to find a clear majority for any of the options. And yet the result of the House's decision on Friday not to endorse the withdrawal agreement means that the default legal position is that the UK will leave the EU in just 11 days' time. To secure any further extension, the government will have to put forward a credible proposition to the EU as to what we will do with that extra time. This House has continuously rejected leaving without a deal, just as it has rejected not leaving at all. Therefore, the only option is to find a way through which allows the UK to leave with a deal. The government continues to believe that the best course of action is to do so as soon as possible. If the House were to agree a deal this week, it may still be possible to avoid holding European parliamentary elections. Mr. Speaker, Cabinet will meet in the morning to consider the results of tonight's vote and how we should proceed.
Thank you, Secretary of State. Point of order, the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
On a point of order, it's disappointing that no solution has won a majority this evening. But I remind the House that the Prime Minister's unacceptable deal has been overwhelmingly rejected 3 times. The margin of defeat for one of the options tonight was very narrow indeed, and the Prime Minister's deal has been rejected by very large majorities on 3 occasions. If it's good enough for the Prime Minister to have 3 chances at her deal, then I suggest that possibly the House should have a chance to consider again the options that we had before us today in a debate on Wednesday, so that the House can succeed where the Prime Minister has failed in presenting a credible economic relationship with Europe for the future that prevents us crashing out with no deal.
Thank you to the Leader. Yes, point of order, Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It would indeed be an outrage if the government sought to bring back its deal. It really is about time that the government accepted reality, that the deal that the government put forward has been defeated 3 times, with the largest defeat in parliamentary history. Now, Mr. Speaker...
No, the right honourable gentleman is entitled to be heard, and believe me, notwithstanding the shouting from a sedentary position, he will be heard. That's the be-all and end-all of it. It's as simple as that. The right honourable gentleman will be heard. Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I acknowledge that I'm disappointed that tonight that we haven't won with revoke, with having a people's vote and a single market customs union. But the reality, Mr. Speaker, is that these votes on 2 occasions have won by a very small number. And we need to try and see where we can find consensus and work together. But fundamentally, from us that represent seats in Scotland, we voted to remain in the European Union. And tonight, Mr. Speaker, a vast majority of Scottish MPs have voted to revoke Article 50. A vast majority of Scottish MPs have voted for a people's vote. A vast majority of Scottish MPs have voted to stay in the single market and customs union. It is crystal clear to us from Scotland that our votes in this House are disrespected. And it's becoming increasingly clear to the people of Scotland that if we want to secure our future as a European nation, then we're going to have to take our own responsibilities. And, Mr. Speaker, the case is this. Sovereignty rests with the people of Scotland, not with this House. The day is coming where we will determine our own future, and it will be as an independent country.
Thank you. Yes, I'll take a point of order from Mr. Nicholas Bowles.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, I have given everything to an attempt to find...
Watch this debate. The debate in the beginning was very, very nice. It was a consensual vote, debate. People were trying to find a way through. And then Stephen Barclay came to the dispatch box and the whole atmosphere changed. And then we went into this voting, and surprisingly, no single thing came forward as winning. Why? Obviously, it would take a while to go through all the figures. Kenneth Clarke's motion for a customs union was the closest at being passed, only 3 votes in it. Mr. Corbyn, Jeremy Corbyn, leader of opposition, got up in response and said if the Prime Minister had 3 chances at her deal and it not got passed, why shouldn't the Parliament have another shot at voting for these things again next Wednesday? But Stephen Barclay said, well, we need to see if we can get this through this week to avoid going into the European elections. Then we had Ian Blackford, who said that the vast majority of Scottish MPs had voted for revoking, had voted for a customs union, and had voted for a people's vote. But the votes of the vast majority of Scottish MPs had been disrespected. And he said that the time was coming that Scotland would have to take its sovereignty into its own hands and decide for itself by being an independent nation. So I've been through the trade deals that Mr. Liam Fox has managed to achieve. That's where we're heading with WTO rules. Unless Mrs. May brings back her deal this week and manages to pass it, but she's going to be finding that very difficult. And it looks like there'll be some more indicative votes on Wednesday, because that was in the business motion. So there might be we might still be just hanging on by our fingernails. So Joanna Cherry's was 191 to 192. 292. So people have voted no against that. So it's a lot of people. And of course, the Labour people were told to abstain from that. So if they had only put their force behind it, Joanna Cherry's would have, and we would be looking at least a safe way out. But we're not looking at that now. I don't know, I'm sure you've had enough of us going on at you, but I'm going to leave you with a story that a great man in Switzerland told me. He said there was a man and he climbed a cliff. And he was halfway up the cliff and he looked up and there was a tiger glaring down at him. And he couldn't therefore go up. And he looked down and beneath him was another tiger. And he realized he couldn't go down. And there was no escape to the right or the left, or to the diagonals up or down. But he saw a wild strawberry growing, I beg your pardon. And he saw that wild strawberry and he reached out and he just managed to grab it. And he pulled it and he put it in his mouth. And it was the best strawberry he ever tasted in his life. So I'll be back here tomorrow, probably. Look forward to seeing you. Bye-bye.